My wife Clara died exactly 365 days ago. She left me with a silent house, a broken heart, and a $2 million diamond ring hidden in a wall safe. Yesterday, my daughter Jasmine sold it. She did not sell it to save a life or pay off a debt. She sold 40 years of my blood and sweat to fund a luxury vacation to the Maldives with her husband. But they made one fatal calculation error. They forgot that before I was a grieving widower, I was a structural engineer in Chicago. I know exactly how to find the cracks in a foundation and bring a house down. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Your support helps me share the truth. The combination to the safe was 1980-05. May 1980. The day I promised Clara I would build her a world she could be safe in. My fingers trembled as I turned the cold steel dial. It was our anniversary. I just wanted to hold the ring. I wanted to polish the platinum band and watch the light catch that 5-carat stone just to feel close to her for a moment. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan that sounded too much like my own joints. I reached into the dark compartment. My hand met air. I froze. The velvet box was there, but when I lifted it, my stomach dropped to the floor. It was light. Too light. I flipped the lid open. Empty. The black velvet stared back at me like a hollow eye. No diamond, no sparkle, just the void where my wife's legacy used to be. I did not call the police. I did not scream. A structural engineer does not panic when he sees a crack. He assesses the load. Only 2 people knew the combination to that safe. Me and the little girl I used to bounce on my knee. I closed the safe. I didn't even lock it back up. What was the point? The only thing of value was already gone. I walked out of my house and climbed into my 2015 Ford truck. The engine roared to life, a rough, reliable sound that contrasted with the chaos in my chest. I drove across town to the darker side of my generosity. The Glass Tower Apartments. I paid $4,000 a month for Unit 42B so my daughter Jasmine and her husband Brad could live in style while they supposedly looked for jobs. In reality, I was paying for them to play pretend. I didn't buzz up. I had a key. Another mistake I had made, thinking family meant open doors. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, my work boots heavy on the polished marble. I could hear music thumping before I even reached their door. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Expensive perfume mixed with the stale scent of champagne. The living room looked like a tornado had hit a designer boutique. There were suitcases everywhere. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, brand new. The leather was so fresh it still shined. Clothes were draped over the furniture I had bought them. Silk shirts, linen trousers, wide-brimmed hats. And there in the center of the chaos stood Jasmine and Brad. Jasmine was holding a bikini up to her body in the mirror. Brad was popping the cork on a bottle of Dom Perignon. They froze when they saw me. The cork flew across the room and hit the ceiling with a festive pop that felt like a gunshot in the silence. Dad, Jasmine said, lowering the bikini. Her voice wasn't welcoming. It was annoyed. You can't just barge in here. We are busy. I looked at the suitcases. Then I looked at the tickets lying on the coffee table. First class, Emirates, Chicago to Mail. One way. Where did you get the money, Jasmine? I asked. My voice was low. It was the voice I used when a foreman tried to cut corners on a load-bearing wall. Brad stepped forward. He was wearing a white linen suit that probably cost more than my truck. He had that smirk on his face, the one that always made my hands itch. He swirled the champagne in his glass. Relax, Zeke, Brad said. He never called me Dad. Always Zeke. We had a liquidity event. We are investing in our mental health. This city is toxic. We need a reset. I walked past him and picked up a receipt from the table. It was for a diamond broker downtown. The sum at the bottom made my knees weak. $800,000. They sold a $2 million ring for $800,000. They didn't just steal it, they insulted it. You stole your mother's ring, I said, turning to Jasmine. I didn't shout. I couldn't. The air had left my lungs. Jasmine flinched, but then she crossed her arms. Her face hardened. That was the face of a stranger. Mom is dead. Dad. She doesn't need a ring. It was just sitting in a dark box gathering dust. It is ridiculous to keep that much money locked up when we are struggling. Struggling? I gestured around the room. I pay your rent. I pay your car insurance. I pay for your groceries. You have never struggled a day in your life because I broke my back to make sure you didn't have to. That is your job, Jasmine screamed, her face turning red. You are the parent. You are supposed to provide, but you are so stingy. You sit on that pile of assets while Brad has these amazing business ideas that just need a little capital. We didn't steal it. I am the heir. It would have been mine eventually anyway. We just advanced the timeline. I looked at Brad. He was smirking, taking a sip of his wine. He looked at me with pure condescension. It is just a rock, Zeke, Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. It is compressed carbon. It has no utility. We are trading a useless object for life experiences, for memories. That is what Clara would have wanted. She wanted Jasmine to be happy. You are the one being selfish, hoarding a symbol while your children starve for opportunity. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to strike him. I wanted to wipe that arrogance off his face. But I saw the way he was looking at me. He was waiting for it. He wanted me to lose control. I want the money back, I said. Give me the check. We can go to the broker and buy it back. Now. Brad laughed. A cold, dry sound. Too late, old man. The money is already in crypto. It is diversified, and honestly, it is none of your business. This is our marital asset now. I took a step toward him. Get out. I want you out of this apartment. I am canceling the lease. Today. Brad's smile vanished. He stepped in front of Jasmine not to protect her, but to use her as a shield. He leaned in close to my face. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. If you cut us off, Zeke, if you make one phone call to the landlord or the bank, you will never see Jasmine again. We will disappear. You will die alone in that big empty house with your ghosts. Is that what you want? Do you want to lose the only person you have left over a piece of jewelry? I looked at Jasmine. She didn't look away. She didn't defend me. She stood behind her husband, clutching a designer handbag, her eyes cold and defiant. She had made her choice. Get out, Brad said, pointing to the door. Go home, Zeke. Let us enjoy our vacation. We will send you a postcard. I stood there for a long moment. I looked at the daughter I had raised, the girl I had taught to ride a bike, the woman whose tuition I had paid. I realized then that the daughter I loved had died with her mother. This person in front of me was a stranger. I turned around and walked to the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly. The click of the latch sounded final. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding a rhythm of war against my ribs. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped me of my leverage. They thought I was just a sad, lonely old man who would take the abuse to keep a connection. They were wrong. Brad was right about one thing. It was just carbon. But he forgot that diamonds are the hardest substance on earth. And he had just taught me that I needed to be just as hard. I didn't go home. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. When a building is about to collapse, it usually gives you a warning. Concrete cracks. Steel groans under the pressure. Rivets pop like gunshots. But sometimes catastrophic failure is silent. It happens internally, deep in the foundation, where the rot has been eating away at the support beams for years. That was my family. The facade looked strong from the outside. A successful engineer, father, a beautiful daughter, a polished son-in-law. But as I drove my truck back from their apartment, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I knew the structural integrity was gone. The collapse had happened. Now it was just a matter of cleaning up the debris. I walked into my silent house. The air was still thick with the memory of Clara. Her lavender potpourri was still in the bowl by the door. I didn't go to the kitchen to drink. I didn't go to the bedroom to cry. I went straight to my study. This was where I designed skyscrapers that could withstand earthquakes. This was where I calculated load bearings for bridges. And tonight, this was where I was going to calculate the demolition of my daughter's financial lifeline. I sat down at my heavy oak desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room, illuminating the photos of Jasmine on the wall. Jasmine at graduation. Jasmine at her wedding. Jasmine before she met Brad. I looked at those eyes, innocent and full of promise, and I forced myself to remember the coldness I had just seen in the apartment. That wasn't my daughter anymore. That was a stranger addicted to a lifestyle she hadn't earned. I logged into the bank portal. The numbers stared back at me. The joint accounts, the supplementary credit cards, the emergency fund access. It was a web of generosity I had spun to catch them if they fell. Instead, they had used it as a hammock to rest in while they robbed me. I pulled up the transaction history for the Platinum American Express card I had given Jasmine for emergencies. Emergencies. The list was a testament to their greed. $400 for a sushi dinner, $2,000 for a handbag, $600 for a spa day, and then the pending charge from just an hour ago, $5,000 for flight upgrades. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was the hardest thing I had ever had to do. It felt like cutting the rope, holding a climber who refused to climb. But I remembered the empty safe. I remembered Brad's smirk. I remembered Jasmine standing behind him choosing a thief over her father. I clicked. Account frozen. Status stolen. I moved to the next card. The Visa Black. Click. Terminated. I moved to the checking account linkage. Click. Severed. One by one I turned off the lights in their financial world. I didn't leave them a candle. I stripped them of every cent that had my name attached to it. When I was done, the screen showed a series of red padlocks. It was finished. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark listening to the grandfather clock tick. I knew the reaction would come. Physics dictates that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I just had to wait. It didn't take long. At 3:14 in the morning, my cell phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It buzzed like an angry hornet. The screen lit up with a picture of Jasmine, but I knew it wasn't her. I picked it up and didn't say a word. I just breathed. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Zeke?" It was Brad. His voice was slurred, panicked, and laced with a rage that made the speaker crackle. In the background, I could hear the hum of an airport terminal and the distinct chime of a boarding announcement. The card declined. Brad shouted, "We are at the Heavy Hitters Lounge. I just tried to pay for a bottle of whiskey and the machine screamed at me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is?" The bartender looked at me like I was a pauper. "Fix it. Fix it right now." I leaned back in my chair. My voice was calm, dangerously calm. "The bank is closed, Brad. And so is the charity." "Listen to me, you old fossil," Brad hissed. "We have a flight in 40 minutes. If we get on that plane without funds, we are stranded. You are going to unfreeze those cards immediately, or I swear to God I will ruin you." "Ruin me?" I asked. "How do you plan to do that? You don't own anything. You don't build anything. You are a parasite." "I have a phone, Zeke. I have followers." Brad's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "I will go live right now. I will tell everyone that the great Ezekiel Turner has lost his mind. Dementia. That is what I will call it. I will say you forgot who we were. I will say you attacked Jasmine. I will say you are unfit to manage your own affairs. I will have you put in a state home before the sun comes up. Do you hear me? I will paint you as a senile, abusive monster who needs to be locked away." I closed my eyes. The threat was real. In this world, a lie travels halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. But Brad had made a mistake. He talked too much. "Why are you so desperate to leave the country?" "Brad," I asked softly. Silence on the other end. I saw the withdrawal history before I cut the access. I continued. "You didn't just sell the ring for a vacation. You sold it because the crypto exchange liquidated your position yesterday morning. You lost Jasmine's savings. You lost the down payment for the house you lied about buying, and you owe money to people who don't take American Express. How do you—" Brad started, his voice trembling. "I am an engineer," I said. "I look at the data. You aren't going to the Maldives to swim, Brad. You are running away, and you are dragging my daughter down with you. You don't know anything," Brad screamed. He sounded like a cornered rat now. "You are just a jealous old man guarding a pile of dust. Unlock the cards or I will post the video. I swear I will. I will destroy your reputation." "Go ahead," I said. "Post it. But remember, once you do, there is no coming back. You are on your own." I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I just pressed the red button. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was heavy. Heavy with the knowledge that my daughter was trapped in a plane with a desperate man flying toward an island with no money and no way home. I had saved my assets, but I wasn't sure if I could save her. I sat there until the sun began to bleed through the blinds. Gray light for a gray morning. I needed coffee. Strong coffee. I stood up, my knees popping, and walked toward the kitchen. As I passed the hallway table, the landline phone rang. I froze. No one called the landline. We kept it only because Clara insisted on having a backup for emergencies. The number was unlisted. Only family and a very select group of old friends had it. Brad and Jasmine were in the air by now. I picked up the receiver. The plastic felt cold against my ear. "Hello, Mr. Turner." The voice was deep gravelly and carried an accent I hadn't heard in years. Eastern European, perhaps, or Yiddish. It wasn't a telemarketer. It wasn't a scammer. It was the voice of a man who dealt in serious matters. "Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Solomon," the voice said. "I am a jeweler. I believe you know my shop on 47th Street. I gripped the phone tighter. "The shop where Jasmine sold the ring. I don't want to buy it back," I said, my voice hardening. "If you bought stolen property, that is between you and the police." "No, Mr. Turner. You misunderstand. I am not calling to sell you anything. I am calling because of a promise." "A promise?" "Yes. 30 years ago, a woman came to my shop. She brought me a diamond, a very rare, very specific cut. She told me that one day this ring might come back to me. She made me swear on the Torah that if it was ever sold by anyone other than her, I was to contact her husband immediately." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Clara." "I am holding the ring now," Mr. Turner Solomon said. "It is called Clara's heart. And there is something inside the setting that the young couple did not see. They were too busy counting the cash, but you need to see it. You need to see. It is not just a gem. It is a message. And it changes everything." I stood in the hallway, the receiver trembling in my hand. Clara had been gone for a year, but she was still protecting me. She was still building safety nets I didn't even know existed. "I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. I hung up the phone. I grabbed my keys. I forgot about the coffee. I forgot about the fatigue. I had a new mission. Brad thought he was playing checkers, moving pieces around a board. He didn't realize he was playing against a woman who had seen his betrayal coming decades before he even committed it. I walked out the door, and for the first time since Clara died, I didn't feel alone. I felt like I was going to war, and my general had just sent me the battle plans from the grave. 47th Street in New York is not a place for the sentimental. It is a concrete canyon of steel glass and armed guards. They call it the Diamond District, but to me it always looked like a fortress built on greed and paranoia. I parked my truck 3 blocks away to avoid the exorbitant garage fees. Walking down the street, I kept my hand in my pocket, gripping the key to my house, the only thing I had left that felt secure. I stopped in front of a nondescript storefront. The sign was small, faded gold leaf on reinforced glass. Solomon and Sons, rare gems. There were no flashy displays in the window, no neon signs promising discount engagement rings. Solomon did not sell to tourists. He dealt in history. I pressed the buzzer. A camera swiveled to look at me. A moment later, the heavy magnetic lock disengaged with a solid thud. I pushed the door open and stepped into the cool, quiet air of the shop. It smelled of old paper and metal polish. The chaos of the city vanished the moment the door clicked shut behind me. Solomon was standing behind a high counter. He was a small man, shrinking with age, but his eyes behind thick glasses were sharp as the diamonds he graded. He wore a jeweler loop around his neck like a stethoscope. He did not smile. He simply nodded and locked the front door, flipping the sign to closed. Mr. Turner Solomon said softly, "Thank you for coming." I walked to the counter. I felt heavy. My bones ached. I leaned against the glass, looking at the empty velvet tray sitting there. "Where is it?" I asked. Solomon reached under the counter. His movements were slow and deliberate. He pulled out a black box. My heart stopped. I knew that box. I had held it 40 years ago when I asked Clara to marry me. He placed it on the glass between us. He didn't open it yet. "They came in yesterday afternoon," Solomon said. "Your daughter and that man. The husband." He did most of the talking. He was very loud. He wanted cash. He was insulted when I insisted on a wire transfer. He said cash is king. I told him paper burns but gold stays. Did they hesitate, I asked. I needed to know. I needed to know if Jasmine looked at the ring one last time. If she remembered me. If she remembered her mother. Solomon looked at me with pity. Pity is a terrible thing for a man like me to see. The girl looked at the floor, Solomon said. But the husband. He looked at the calculator. He asked if I could melt down the platinum setting to get a few extra dollars. He called the design outdated. I closed my eyes. Outdated. That design was inspired by the Brooklyn Bridge. It was structured to hold the weight of the world. Brad wanted to melt it down for scrap. Solomon opened the box. There it was. Clara's heart. 5 carats of flawless structural integrity. It sat there defiant, sparkling under the halogen lights. It looked lonely. I reached out to touch it, but Solomon stopped me. He placed a hand gently on my wrist. "Look closer, Zeke," he said. He used my first name. That meant this was not business, this was personal. He slid a heavy microscope across the counter. "Your wife, Clara. She was a woman of immense foresight. 10 years ago she came to me. She brought this ring. She told me she was worried. She said you were a builder, a man who sees the best in what he creates. But she said you sometimes ignore the cracks in the people you love because you want them to be strong." I stiffened. Clara saw everything. She saw the rot in Jasmine before I did. She asked me to make a modification. Solomon continued. "A fail-safe. She paid me a lot of money to do it and to keep it a secret even from you. She said if the day ever comes that this ring is sold by anyone other than Zeke, show him the inscription." I leaned over the microscope. I adjusted the focus. The blue light washed over the diamond. I peered into the heart of the stone. Deep inside, on the girdle of the diamond, invisible to the naked eye, there was a laser inscription. It was burnt into the carbon atom by atom. Protocol Z, 1980. I pulled back. 1980, the year we were married. Protocol Z. "What does it mean?" I whispered. Solomon reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Clara's elegant script. The ink was slightly faded. "To my dearest Zeke." My hands shook as I took the letter. It smelled like her, lavender and vanilla. I tore it open. The sound of the paper tearing was the loudest thing in the room. "My beloved Zeke. If you are reading this, my heart breaks for you. It means I am gone, and it means our daughter has lost her way." I sat down on the stool Solomon offered. I couldn't stand. I read on. "I know you, Zeke. You are a provider. You build shelters for everyone else. You will give Jasmine everything even if she doesn't earn it. You will try to fix her husband, Brad, even though we both know he is a termite in our family foundation. You see the good. I see the math. I know that one day Brad will desperate for money. He is a man who builds castles on sand, and when his walls crumble, he will come for our bricks. This ring is the biggest brick we have, so I have created a ghost trust." I looked up at Solomon. "A ghost trust," Reed Solomon said. "The ring is not just a rock, Zeke. It is a key. Years ago, I moved the majority of my real estate portfolio into a blind trust. You thought I sold those properties in Chicago. I didn't. I leveraged them. They have been growing for a decade. The trust is worth $20 million today." I gasped. 20 million. Clara had been a genius. She played the market while I played with blueprints. But here is the condition the letter continued. This trust is dormant. It only activates upon 2 conditions. 1, my death. 2, the betrayal. If Jasmine keeps this ring, the trust remains locked, and she receives a modest allowance. But if she sells this ring while you are still alive, she triggers the disinheritance clause. By selling the symbol of our marriage for quick cash, she proves she is not ready to manage the legacy. The moment this ring is sold, the trust activates. But not for her. It activates for you, Zeke. The entire corpus transfers to your sole control to do with as you please. You can donate it, you can burn it, or you can use it to teach them a lesson they will never forget. But there is a catch, my love. You need proof. I looked up. Proof. Solomon nodded. He leaned forward, his face serious. The law is tricky, Mr. Turner. If Jasmine claims the ring was stolen or lost, or that she was coerced, the clause is void. She gets the money. To trigger the ghost trust to take control of that $20 million and strip them of everything you need. Proof that she sold it willingly. You need proof that she chose the money over the memory. I stared at the ring. Clara had given me a weapon. A nuclear option. But I had to detonate it. I have the receipt, Solomon said. But a receipt is just paper. Brad is a snake. He will say he stole it, and Jasmine didn't know. He will take the fall for a theft charge to save the $20 million inheritance. He is calculated. He is, I said. I remembered the phone call. Brad threatened to claim I was senile. He would spin this. He would say I gave them the ring, or that he took it without her knowing. I need a confession, I said. My voice was cold. The engineer was back. I was looking at the problem. I needed to stress test the structure until it failed. I needed Jasmine to admit on record that she wanted the money more than she wanted her mother's memory. Solomon closed the box. He pushed it toward me. I cannot give you the ring back yet, Mr. Turner. Technically, it belongs to the shop until we resolve the ownership dispute, but I will hold it. I will keep it safe. Go get your proof. I stood up. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket right next to my heart. I felt stronger. I wasn't just a victim of elder abuse anymore. I was the executor of a master plan. I walked out of the shop into the blinding sunlight of 47th Street. The noise of the city rushed back in, but I didn't hear it. All I heard was the sound of a plan forming in my head. I took out my phone. I dialed Jasmine's number again. It went to voicemail. You have reached Jasmine and Brad. We are living our best lives. Leave a message. I didn't leave a message. I ended the call. They wanted to play games fine. I was going to invite them to dinner. I was going to cook Clara's famous gumbo. I was going to be the sweet, forgiving father they expected me to be, and I was going to wear a wire. I walked toward my truck. The structural integrity of their lies was about to be tested, and I knew exactly where to place the explosives. In my line of work, we have a term called controlled failure. It is when you deliberately weaken a specific part of a structure so that if it collapses, it falls exactly where you want it to without damaging the surrounding buildings. That is what I had to do now. I had to weaken myself. I had to become the very thing Brad accused me of being. A senile, confused old man who didn't know left from right. I had to lower my defenses so they would walk right into the blast zone. I sat in my study, the letter from Clara burning a hole in my pocket. I looked at the recording device I had bought years ago to record client meetings. It was small digital and could record for 12 hours straight. I taped it to the underside of the dining room table. I tested it 3 times. Check, check, check. The audio was crisp. It would pick up a whisper. It would certainly pick up a confession. I took a deep breath. I needed to get into character. I slumped my shoulders. I let my hand tremble a little. I dialed Jasmine's number. It rang 4 times. I imagined them sitting on their suitcases in the terminal, the humiliation burning their skin. Hello? Jasmine answered. Her voice was thick with tears and anger. Jasmine, baby, I said. My voice wavered. I made it sound thin, frail. I don't know what happened earlier. I was looking for your mother's ring and I got so confused. I forgot you told me you borrowed it. Silence on the other end. Then a shift. You forgot, Jasmine asked, her voice sharp. You kicked us out, Dad. You humiliated us. You froze our accounts. I know, I stammered. I am sorry. My head, it hasn't been right lately. The doctor gave me some new pills for the blood pressure and they make me foggy. I got scared. I don't know what I thought. I'm just an old man alone in this big house. Please don't go. I can't handle the finances anymore. It is too much math, too many numbers. I held my breath. This was the bait. I was offering them exactly what they wanted, control. I heard muffled voices on the other end. Brad was listening. Of course he was. Dad, Jasmine said, her voice softer now, but it wasn't the softness of love. It was the softness of a predator stalking injured prey. You are saying you made a mistake. Yes, I lied. A massive lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. I made a mistake. Please come home. I will fix the bank accounts. We can have dinner. I made your mother's gumbo. I just want my family. This house is too big for me. Maybe Brad was right. Maybe I need help managing things. There was a pause. Then I heard the phone being snatched away. Zeke Brad's voice came on. Smooth, oily, too loud. Look, we are very hurt. You caused a scene. You damaged my professional reputation today. But we are family, and if you are admitting that you are having cognitive episodes, then we need to step up. We can't leave you alone in this condition. Thank you, Brad, I said, forcing the words out. Thank you for understanding. We are coming back, Brad said. But Zeke, we need to have a serious conversation about the future. We can't have you running around freezing assets every time you have a senior moment. It is dangerous. I know, I said. We will talk. Just come home. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from age. From rage. They took the bait. They didn't care that I was sick. They didn't ask what doctor I saw. They didn't ask about the medication. They only heard two phrases: too many numbers and manage things. I went to the kitchen. I started the roux for the gumbo, flour and oil. You have to stir it constantly until it turns the color of dark chocolate. It takes patience. Clara taught me that. She used to say, "Zeke, you can't rush a good base. If you burn the flour, the whole pot is ruined." As I stirred, I thought about the house. $4 million. It sat on 2 acres of prime real estate just outside the city. I had designed it myself. Reinforced steel beams, triple-paned glass. It was a fortress, and Brad wanted to sell it. I knew his plan as clearly as if he had laid the blueprints on the counter. Put the crazy old man in a home, sell the house, take the cash, invest in his crypto schemes. I let the smell of onion, celery, and bell peppers fill the air. The holy trinity of Cajun cooking. It smelled like home. It smelled like safety. It was the perfect camouflage for a trap. 2 hours later, a taxi pulled into the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window. It wasn't the white limousine they usually hired. It was a beat-up yellow cab. They looked disheveled. Jasmine's mascara was smudged. Brad's linen suit was wrinkled. But they weren't carrying suitcases. They left those in the trunk. Brad was carrying a thick, legal-sized, expandable folder. I knew what was in that folder. I had seen enough contracts in my life to recognize a hostile takeover when I saw one. That wasn't a folder of apology letters. That was a folder of power of attorney forms, guardianship papers, medical competency waivers. They weren't coming in to eat dinner. They were coming in to sign my life away. I went to the front door. I put a confused smile on my face. I hunched my back just a fraction. I opened the door. Daddy Jasmine cried out. She rushed to hug me. For a second, just a split second, I wanted to hug her back. I wanted to believe she was really worried about me. But then I felt her patting my back. It wasn't a comfort pat, it was a check. She was checking if I was frail. She was checking the structure. "I am so sorry, Dad," she said, pulling away. "You scared us." Come in," I said, shuffling my feet. "The gumbo is ready." Brad walked in behind her. He didn't hug me. He didn't shake my hand. He walked in like he owned the place. He looked at the high ceilings. He looked at the marble floors. He looked at the walls as if calculating the square footage. "Smells good, Zeke," Brad said. He dropped the heavy folder on the dining room table, right on top of where the microphone was taped underneath. Thud. The sound echoed in the room. "What is that?" I asked, pointing a trembling finger at the folder. Brad smiled. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "Just some paperwork, Zeke, to help you. Since you are having trouble with the details, I had my lawyer draft up some things to make your life easier. We can handle the burdens. You just relax." He patted the folder. "We are going to take care of everything," he said. I looked at Jasmine. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was looking at the folder too. "Come," I said. "Let's eat first. I am sure you are hungry." I led them to the table. I sat at the head. Jasmine sat to my right. Brad sat to my left. The folder sat between us. The microphone was recording. The stage was set. I picked up the ladle and poured the dark, rich stew into their bowls. "Eat," I said. "It is your mother's recipe." Brad took a spoonful. He didn't even taste it. He just swallowed. "So about the ring," Brad said, his mouth full. "We need to clear that up before we sign these papers." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Here it comes." "What about it?" I asked innocently. Brad put down his spoon. He leaned in close. The microphone would catch every syllable. "You gave it to us, Zeke. Remember, you told us to sell it. Last week. You said, take this old rock and go enjoy your life. You remember that, don't you?" He was gaslighting me. He was trying to rewrite history to fit his narrative. I don't remember saying that," I whispered. Jasmine reached out and covered my hand. Her hand was cold. "You did, Dad," she said softly. "You said Mom would want us to be happy. You said to sell it. Try to remember." I looked at them. My daughter, my son-in-law, lying to my face, trying to convince me I was crazy so they could steal $20 million they didn't even know existed. I took a deep breath. I had to get the specific words, so I asked, looking confused. I told you to sell the ring for cash, specifically for cash. Yes, Brad said eagerly. Exactly. You said get cash, Brad. Don't leave a paper trail. You wanted us to have tax-free spending money. And I said it was okay to sell Mom's legacy, I asked, turning to Jasmine. Jasmine hesitated. She looked at the ring finger on her left hand where a cheap band now sat. Yes, Dad, she whispered. You said the ring didn't matter. You said only money matters. Gotcha. The word echoed in my head. I had them. They had just admitted to the conspiracy. They had admitted to the motive. And they had admitted that the ring was sold, not stolen. I picked up my spoon. I suddenly felt very hungry. My back straightened. The tremble in my hand vanished. Well, I said, my voice dropping an octave, returning to its normal deep timbre. If I said that, I must have been very confused indeed. Brad frowned. He noticed the change in my tone. He looked at me, really looked at me. But the gumbo, I said, taking a bite. The gumbo is clear. What are you talking about? Brad asked, his eyes narrowing. I am talking about the fact that this house, I said, looking around, has excellent acoustics. The dining room was quiet except for the sound of silver spoons hitting fine china. It was a rhythmic, metallic clinking that sounded like a countdown. Clink, clink, clink. I watched them eat. Brad was shoveling the gumbo into his mouth as if he hadn't seen food in a week. Jasmine ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the dark roux, refusing to look at me. This gumbo was Clara's masterpiece. It takes 4 hours to make. You have to chop the okra just right. You have to brown the sausage until the casing snaps. It is a dish of love. Watching Brad eat it without tasting it, treating it like fuel for his greed, made my stomach turn. But I didn't eat. I just sat there, my hand resting on the table right above the microphone taped underneath. This house is getting old. Zeke, Brad said, wiping his mouth with one of Clara's embroidered linen napkins. He threw it on the table, stained red with cayenne pepper. I really looked at the roof when we walked in. The shingles are curling. You have got water damage waiting to happen. And these stairs, they are a death trap for a man your age. One slip, and it is hip replacement city. I looked at the ceiling. I had reinforced those beams myself 10 years ago. I had installed a slate roof that was guaranteed for a century. The house was solid. It was Brad who was hollow. It is a lot to maintain, I said, keeping my voice shaky. The garden alone takes me all weekend. Sometimes I forget to water the roses and they die. Clara loved those roses. Exactly, Brad said, leaning forward. His eyes lit up. He smelled weakness. That is why we think you should consider Sunset Villas. I have a friend who manages it. It is high-end Zeke. 5-star dining. Heated pools. Medical staff on call 24/7. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. You could just relax and play chess. Sunset Villas. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the elderly. A place where they sedate you to keep you quiet and drain your bank account until you flatline. And the house, I asked. What happens to the house? Brad shrugged, trying to look casual. We would sell it, of course. The market is hot right now. We could get maybe $3.5 million if we move fast. We would put that money into a managed fund for your care. Jasmine and I would oversee it to make sure you get the best treatment. I looked at Jasmine. She was gripping her wine glass so hard her knuckles were white. Is that what you want, Jasmine? I asked softly. You want to sell the home you grew up in, the home where your mother died? Jasmine looked up. Her eyes were wet, but then she looked at Brad. He gave her a sharp warning look. It is for the best, Dad, she whispered. It is too big for you. We just want you to be safe. Safe. That was the word they used to wrap their dagger in velvet. I sighed. A long, defeated sigh. I let my shoulders slump. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. Maybe you are right, I said. I am tired. I am so tired of fighting. The numbers confuse me. The maintenance is too hard. Maybe it is time to let go. Brad practically vibrated with excitement. He reached for the thick folder he had brought. He opened it and pushed a stack of papers toward me. I knew you would see reason, Zeke, he said, clicking a heavy gold pen. This is a standard power of attorney, and a transfer of deed for the property. Once you sign this, we can handle the logistics. You won't have to worry about a thing. I picked up the pen. I held it over the paper. The tip hovered over the signature line. Brad stopped breathing. He was watching the pen like a hawk watching a field mouse. But I stopped. I pulled the pen back. There is just one thing I said. Brad's smile faltered. What? What is it? I need to know something. Before I give you everything. Before I give you the house, the accounts, the control of my life, I need to know the truth about the ring. Brad rolled his eyes. Zeke, we went over this. You told us to sell it. No, I said firmly. My voice hardened just a fraction. I need to hear you say why. Why did you sell it, Brad? Why was it so easy for you? If you lie to me now, I won't sign. If you tell me the truth, I will sign right now. I stared at him. I channeled every ounce of authority I had left. Brad looked at the papers. He looked at the house around him. He looked at the $4 million prize sitting on the table. He did the math. He decided the truth was a small price to pay. He leaned in. His face was ugly with arrogance. You want to know why, Zeke? Fine, because it is useless. It is a rock. It sat in a box in the dark for a year. It wasn't doing anything. It wasn't earning interest. It wasn't paying bills. It was a dead asset belonging to a dead woman. I flinched, but I didn't interrupt. The microphone was recording every word. We needed the liquidity. Brad continued, his voice rising. I have debts, okay. I made some bad calls on the market. We were drowning. That ring was a lifeline. We sold it because we deserve a future more than you deserve a memory. You are holding on to the past, Zeke. We sold it because we wanted the money. Simple as that. We took it, we sold it, and we spent it. Are you happy now? I looked at Jasmine. Did you know I asked? She nodded. Yes, Dad. We needed the money. Brad said it was the only way. Got it. I had it. Intent. Motive. Admission of unauthorized sale. The ghost trust conditions were met. The trap had snapped shut. I looked at Brad one last time. Thank you for your honesty, I said. I put the pen to the paper. I signed my name, Ezekiel Turner. Brad snatched the papers away before the ink was even dry. He laughed. A loud, victorious bark. You made the right choice, old man, he said, stuffing the papers into the folder. We will have the movers here on Monday. You should start packing your personal items. Keep it light. The room at Sunset Villas is small. I stood up. I picked up my empty bowl. I am going to bed, I said. Leave the key on the table when you go. I walked to the kitchen. I didn't turn around. I heard them high-fiving. I heard the pop of another champagne bottle. They were celebrating their victory. They didn't look at the papers I signed. If they had, they would have seen that I didn't sign the deed transfer. I signed a document that authorized a structural inspection of the property. That was it. But the power of attorney they had prepared, I signed that one. But what they didn't know was that my lawyer had already filed a preemptive block on any POA signed without a medical witness 2 days ago. The papers were worthless. But the recording tape underneath the table, that was worth $20 million. I washed my bowl in the sink. The water was warm. I looked out into the backyard. The rain had stopped. Enjoy the champagne, Brad, I whispered to the window. It is the last expensive drink you are going to have for a very long time. Victory is a dangerous narcotic. It makes you sloppy. It makes you think the ground beneath your feet is solid concrete when it is actually quicksand. I watched Brad the next morning. He was strutting around my kitchen wearing a silk robe he had bought with money he didn't have barking orders into his cell phone. He thought he had the keys to the kingdom. He thought the papers I signed last night were his golden ticket. He didn't know they were just kindling for the fire I was about to light. I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee, playing the role of the confused old man. I watched him pour orange juice into a crystal glass. He was on a call with someone he called the Shark. Listen to me, Brad hissed into the phone, turning his back to me. The transfer is pending. I have the assets. I have the house. It is a $4 million property. I can leverage it by Friday. Just hold off on the filing. He paused, listening. His shoulders tensed up. The cocky posture vanished. What do you mean it is not enough? Brad whispered, his voice cracking. I sent you $800,000 yesterday. That covers the principal. He listened again. He went pale. Interest. Since when is the interest 40%? Look, I will get you the deed. I will get you the physical deed today. Just don't call the partners. Do not call the firm. He hung up. He gripped the counter so hard his knuckles turned white. He was shaking. I took a sip of coffee. The picture was becoming clearer. The ring wasn't sold for a vacation. It wasn't sold for crypto. It was sold to plug a hole. A very deep, very dangerous hole. An hour later, Brad and Jasmine left in the taxi to go meet with a realtor. As soon as they were gone, I didn't go back to bed. I went to the front door. A courier had just dropped off a thick brown envelope. I had hired Miller, a private investigator who used to do background checks for my engineering firm exactly 12 hours ago. Miller worked fast. He knew that when I asked for a structural analysis of a person, I needed every crack exposed. I took the envelope to my study. I locked the door. I opened it. The contents made my blood run cold. Brad wasn't just a bad investor. He was a criminal. The report detailed everything. Brad had been embezzling from his commercial real estate firm for 2 years. He had been creating fake vendors billing for maintenance that never happened and funneling the money into online gambling accounts. But he got sloppy. The firm had started an internal audit last week. That was the timeline. The audit started Monday. He panicked. He needed $800,000 to replace what he stole before the auditors reached the letter Z. That was why he forced Jasmine to sell the ring. But here was the kicker. The dossier showed a transaction log from yesterday. The $800,000 from Clara's ring had been wired directly to the firm's escrow account. He had paid it back. But the text message log Miller included showed the problem. The firm knew. They had taken the money, but they hadn't stopped the investigation. They were preparing to press charges. And the bookie he owed the one he called the shark that was a separate debt. Brad owed another $200,000 to a loan shark for his gambling losses. He was broke. He had sold my wife's legacy and he was still drowning. And now he needed my house not to invest, but to pay off a thug who was probably threatening to break his legs. I closed the folder. I felt a wave of nausea. Not because of the crime, but because of the waste. Clara's ring. 40 years of love. Gone. Just to delay a prison sentence by a few days. I heard the front door slam open. They were back early. I quickly slid the dossier into my desk drawer and locked it. I heard heavy footsteps thundering down the hallway. It wasn't the walk of a man in charge. It was the run of a man being chased. Zeke Brad screamed. "Where is it?" He burst into my study. He looked wild. His hair was messy, sweat beading on his forehead. Jasmine was running behind him looking terrified. "Where is what, Brad?" I asked, keeping my voice low. I stayed seated. The deed, Brad yelled. He slammed his hand on my desk. "The papers you signed are useless without the physical deed. The realtor needs to see the original title to list it for an emergency cash buyout. Where do you keep it?" I looked at him. I looked at the sweat staining his expensive shirt. "I don't know," I said, feigning confusion. "I think maybe it is in the bank or the attic, I can't remember. There are so many papers." "You are lying," Brad screamed. He grabbed the lamp on my desk and swept it onto the floor. It crashed, shattering the bulb. "Brad, stop!" Jasmine cried out, but she didn't move to stop him. She just stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. He began tearing the room apart. He pulled books off the shelves. He ripped drawers out of the filing cabinet, dumping 20 years of blueprints onto the floor. He was looking for the red binder, the one that held the deed to the house. "It is here. I know." "It is here," Brad muttered, throwing my engineering awards across the room. "I need that money today, Zeke. They are going to come for me." He turned to me. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked insane. "Tell me where it is, old man." I stood up. I am 70 years old, but I'm 6 feet tall. I tried to use my presence to calm him. "Brad, you need to calm down," I said. "You are destroying the house." "I don't care about the house." He lunged at me. He grabbed the lapels of my cardigan. He shoved me backward. I wasn't ready for it. My heel caught on the rug. I went down. I hit the floor hard. My hip slammed against the hardwood. A sharp, white-hot pain shot up my spine. My head bounced against the leg of the desk. My glasses flew off my face. For a moment, the world went black. Then the pain rushed in. I gasped for air. I lay there looking up at the ceiling, feeling the vibration of the floor as Brad continued to rampage. He didn't even look at me. He didn't check if I was breathing. He just turned back to the bookshelf, ripping more volumes down. "Found it," he screamed. He held up a red binder. He ripped it open. It was empty. I had moved the deed to the safe deposit box 3 years ago. "Where is it?" Brad roared, throwing the empty binder at my prone body. It hit my chest. I groaned. I tried to push myself up, but my hip wouldn't support me. I looked toward the doorway. Jasmine was standing there, my daughter. The girl I had carried on my shoulders, the girl I had taught to walk. She was looking right at me. She saw her father lying on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and scattered papers. She saw me wincing in pain. Jasmine, I wheezed. Help me. She looked at me. Then she looked at Brad, who was tearing through another drawer. Did you find it, Brad? She asked. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't scream at him for hurting me. She asked if he found the paper that would give them the money. No. It is not here, Brad yelled. Check his pockets, Jasmine said. Her voice was cold, efficient. Maybe he has the key to a safety deposit box on him. I froze. The pain in my hip faded. It was replaced by a coldness that started in the center of my chest and spread to my fingertips. My daughter wasn't a victim. She wasn't being manipulated. She was an accomplice. She was watching her father lie broken on the floor, and her only concern was looting the body. Brad rushed over to me. He knelt down not to help, but to frisk me, his hands jammed into my pockets. He pulled out my wallet. He pulled out my keys. Here it is, he said, holding up the small silver key to the bank box. Let's go. The bank closes in an hour. He stood up and ran toward the door. Jasmine lingered for a second. She looked down at me. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Shame, regret. Daddy? She started. But then Brad yelled from the hallway. Jasmine, we have to go. The flicker vanished. She hardened her face. You should have just given it to us, she whispered. You made us do this. She turned and ran after him. I heard the front door slam. I lay alone in the wreckage of my study. The silence of the house returned heavy and suffocating. My hip throbbed with a dull rhythmic ache. I didn't call an ambulance. Not yet. I reached for my glasses. One lens was cracked. I put them on. The room looked fractured, broken into jagged pieces, just like my life. I rolled onto my side. I used the desk to pull myself up. It took every ounce of strength I had. I gritted my teeth against the pain. I stood up, swaying on one leg. I walked limping heavily over to the hidden panel behind the family portrait on the wall. The portrait of me, Clara, and a 5-year-old Jasmine. I pushed the hidden latch. The panel slid open. Inside sat the real safe, the one they didn't know about. I took out my phone. I dialed Miller. Miller, I said. My voice didn't sound like Zeke anymore. It sounded like grinding metal. Yeah, Zeke. Call the police, I said. And call the district attorney. Tell them I am ready to press charges. For the fraud, Miller asked. No, I said, looking at the empty space where my daughter had stood. For assault. For elder abuse. And Miller, yeah, call Solomon. Tell him to activate the protocol. The ghost is awake. I hung up. I looked at the cracked lens of my glasses. The man who fell to the floor was a father. The man who stood up was a structural engineer who had just decided that the building was beyond repair. It was time for a controlled demolition. Disappearing is an art form. Most people think it means running away, but for a structural engineer, disappearing is simply removing the load from a failing support beam to see if the building stands or falls. I didn't run away. I just removed myself from the equation. At 4 a.m, under the cover of a heavy thunderstorm, I packed a single bag. I took my medication, a change of clothes, and the red binder that Brad had failed to find. I got into my truck and drove 3 blocks down the street to a spot where the dense oak trees obscured my vehicle, but gave me a perfect line of sight to my front door. I waited. I drank coffee from a thermos and watched the rain lash against the windshield. I needed to see how long it would take them. I needed to see how little time they would mourn my absence before they started counting the walls. It didn't take long. At 9 a.m, a yellow taxi pulled up. Brad and Jasmine stepped out. They didn't look worried. They didn't look like children searching for a missing father. They looked like landlords coming to collect. They walked up to the front porch. I saw Brad try the handle. Locked. I had engaged the deadbolt, the one I installed myself, reinforced with a steel striker plate. Brad kicked the door. I saw his mouth moving, screaming something into the wind. He pulled out his phone. 20 minutes later, a van arrived. A locksmith. I watched as the man drilled into the lock. Sparks flew. It felt like he was drilling into my chest. That lock had protected my family for 30 years. Now my family was paying a stranger to destroy it. The door swung open. They walked in. I imagined them inside. I imagined Brad walking into the living room, spreading his arms wide, claiming his kingdom. I imagined Jasmine taking down Clara's paintings, clearing the walls for something more modern. I imagined them opening the champagne they had brought, toasting to the disappearance of the old man. But their celebration was about to be interrupted. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the local precinct. I didn't ask for a patrol car. I asked for Officer Miller. Miller was a man I had built a deck for 5 years ago. He knew me. He knew my character. And more importantly, he knew the law. Then I made a second call to Mr. Henderson, the bank representative who managed the foundation's assets. 10 minutes later, the show began. 2 police cruisers turned the corner, their lights cutting through the gray morning rain. Silent approach. No sirens. Just the flashing blue and red reflecting off the wet pavement. Behind them was a black sedan, Henderson. I lowered my window a crack to hear. The rain hissed against the glass. The officers walked up to the open front door. Miller had his hand on his belt, not aggressive but ready. Henderson adjusted his tie and followed, carrying a briefcase that contained the truth. I saw Brad appear in the doorway. He was holding a glass of wine. At 10 in the morning, he looked annoyed, not scared. He thought he was the owner. He thought the police were there to help him find his missing father-in-law. I couldn't hear the exact words from this distance, but I knew the script. I had written it. Brad was waving his hand. He was pointing inside. He was probably saying, "Officer, my father is missing. We are just securing the property." Then I saw Miller shake his head. He pointed to the driveway. He pointed to the street. "Get out." Brad laughed. I saw him laugh. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded papers. The power of attorney. The weapon he thought was nuclear. He shoved it in Miller's face. That was when Henderson stepped forward. Henderson is a small man, but he speaks with the weight of a billion-dollar institution. He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a single document. It wasn't folded. It was laminated. I saw Brad freeze. I saw Jasmine step out onto the porch, hugging her arms against the cold. She looked from Brad to the police to the banker. She was starting to realize that the ground was shifting. Brad was shouting now. I could hear his voice over the rain. "This is my house. I have the signature. He is incompetent." Miller stepped forward. He didn't shout. He just placed a hand on Brad's chest and pushed. Not a violent shove, but a firm, authoritative removal of an obstacle. Brad stumbled back. He almost dropped his wine. The conversation inside the circle was intense. Henderson was pointing at the document. He was explaining the difference between personal property and charitable assets. You see, Brad didn't do his due diligence. If he had looked at the property tax records, really looked at them, he would have seen the owner listed not as Ezekiel Turner, but as the Clara and Zeke Foundation. I had transferred the deed 5 years ago. I didn't own the house. I was merely the lifetime tenant, the caretaker. The foundation allowed me to live there until my death, at which point the property would be converted into housing for engineering students. The power of attorney Brad forced me to sign gave him control over my personal checking account and my car. It gave him absolutely zero authority over the foundation's real estate. By breaking the lock, he hadn't entered his father-in-law's home. He had broken into a federally registered non-profit organization. That is a federal crime. I saw the color drain from Brad's face, even from 3 blocks away. He looked at the paper again. He looked at the house. The castle was crumbling. Miller pointed to the street again. This time, he unclipped his taser. Brad didn't argue. He threw the wine glass onto the driveway. It shattered. He grabbed Jasmine's hand. They didn't have their coats. They didn't have their suitcases. Those were still inside, and the police weren't letting them back in to retrieve them. The house was now a crime scene. They walked down the driveway in the pouring rain. Jasmine was crying. I could see her shoulders shaking. Brad was stomping furious, wet, and humiliated. His expensive linen suit was soaked through in seconds. He looked like a drowned rat. They stood on the sidewalk. The locksmith van had already fled. They were alone. No car, no keys, no house. And thanks to my work the night before, no credit cards. I took a sip of my coffee. It was still hot. I watched them argue. Brad was blaming her. She was blaming him. They were turning on each other. Stress reveals cracks, and their relationship was full of them. Miller and Henderson locked the door. They put a police seal on the frame. I started my truck. The engine rumbled. I didn't drive past them. I didn't want them to see me yet. I wasn't ready to reveal that I was watching. Fear is more effective when the threat is invisible. I reversed down the street and took the long way around. I had a meeting with Solomon. We had the second phase of the demolition to plan. Kicking them out into the rain was satisfying, but it was just the eviction. Now I had to bring the lawsuit. Brad thought he had lost a house. He didn't know he was about to lose his freedom. The fall from grace is rarely a straight line. It is a series of collisions hitting every jagged rock on the way down until you land in the mud. For Brad and Jasmine, the mud was the Blue Moon Motel on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed like a dying fly, and the sheets smelled of bleach and regret. They had gone from a $4 million estate to a $40 a night room in less than 6 hours. I sat in my study watching the rain streak the bulletproof glass of my windows. My phone was on the desk. It vibrated. Jasmine. Again. I didn't pick up. A structural engineer knows that when a bridge is burning, you don't run back onto it to save the toll booth. You let it burn. You let the fire consume the rot so you can see what, if anything, is worth salvaging from the ashes. Inside that motel room, the rot was being exposed. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I knew Brad. I knew that parasites do not handle starvation well. When the host cuts off the blood supply, the parasite panics. It lashes out. Brad paced the small, stained carpet of room 104. He was still wearing his wet linen suit, now wrinkled and smelling of damp wool. He kicked the cheap particle board dresser. The veneer cracked. "This is your fault," he screamed. He turned on Jasmine, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, shivering. "You told me he was weak. You told me he was sentimental. You said he would sign anything to keep you happy." "I thought he would," Jasmine whispered. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. She looked small. She looked like the little girl who used to scrape her knees, but I wasn't there to put a bandage on it this time. "He played us," Brad roared. He grabbed the ice bucket and threw it against the wall. It shattered, plastic shards flying everywhere. That old man sat there, ate his gumbo, and looked me in the eye while he set a trap. He is not senile. He is the devil. Jasmine flinched as the plastic hit the wall. She looked at her husband, really looked at him. For years she had seen a visionary. An entrepreneur, a man who promised her the world. Now, under the flickering fluorescent light of a cheap motel, she saw him for what he was. A failure. A bully. A man who had isolated her from the only person who actually loved her. "We need to call him Jasmine," said her voice trembling. "We need to apologize. Maybe if we beg." "Beg," Brad laughed. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. "You want to beg the man who just kicked us into the street? The man who called the cops on me?" "No, we don't beg. We fight." He walked over to her. He grabbed her by the shoulders. His grip was too tight. It wasn't a hug, it was a vice. "You are going to help me fix this, Jasmine. We are not losing that money. I owe people, dangerous people. If I don't get access to those accounts by Friday, breaking into a house will be the least of my problems." "You hurt him, Brad," Jasmine whispered. "I saw you shove him. You hurt my father." "He deserved it," Brad spat. He shook her. "Wake up, Jasmine. He is the enemy. He is hoarding wealth while we suffer. But I have a plan. I have a way to break that foundation nonsense." He let her go and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked from when he dropped it earlier. He dialed a number. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't a family member. It was a man named Saul, a lawyer who had been disbarred twice but still operated out of a strip mall basement. Saul didn't care about the law. He cared about billable hours and loopholes. Jasmine took the opportunity to slip into the bathroom. She locked the flimsy door. She turned on the faucet to mask the sound of her voice. She pulled out her phone and dialed my number again. "Please pick up, Dad," she whispered. "Please." I saw the phone light up again in my study. I saw her name. I reached out. My finger hovered over the green button. I remembered her face when she stood over me while I was on the floor. I remembered her asking Brad if he found the deed instead of asking if I was okay. I let it ring. The silence on her end must have been deafening. She slid down the bathroom wall, burying her face in her knees. She was realizing that some doors once closed do not open just because you knock. Out in the main room, Brad was speaking in low, frantic tones. "Yes, Saul, I need it done tonight. No, I don't have a doctor's signature, but that is why I am calling you. You have that guy right, the one who signed off on the warehouse insurance fraud." "Yeah." "Dr. Miller, I need a retrospective diagnosis." Brad paused, listening. A slow, malicious smile spread across his face. "Exactly. Dementia. Advanced Alzheimer's. We claim the transfer of the deed to the foundation 5 years ago was done under duress or mental decline. We claim he didn't know what he was signing. We get an emergency conservatorship. We take control of him, and we take control of the assets." He laughed. It was the sound of a man who thought he had found the ultimate weapon. Zeke wants to play legal games, Brad said to the empty room. Fine. I will declare him legally incompetent. I will put him in a padded room so fast his head will spin, and then I will sell that house brick by brick. 2 days passed. I spent them fortifying my position. I met with Solomon. We cataloged the evidence. I met with the district attorney regarding the assault. But Brad moved faster than I expected. Desperation is a powerful fuel. On Thursday afternoon, a car pulled up to my driveway. It wasn't the police. It was a private process server, a young man in a cheap suit who looked bored. "Mr. Ezekiel Turner," he asked when I opened the door. "Yes. You have been served." He handed me a thick envelope and walked away. He didn't know he had just handed me a declaration of war. I took the envelope into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. I opened it. Emergency petition for guardianship. Petitioner Bradley J. Smith and Jasmine Turner. Reason: advanced cognitive decline, inability to manage affairs, danger to self and others. Attached was a medical affidavit signed by a doctor, Vincent Miller. A doctor I had never met. A doctor who claimed he had examined me 3 years ago and found significant degradation of the frontal lobe. It was a lie, a bold, verifiable criminal lie. They were claiming I was crazy. They were claiming I was unfit to live in my own home. They were asking the court to immediately freeze all my assets, including the foundation, and place them under the temporary control of my next of kin. Brad, he was going all in. He was betting everything on the idea that a 70-year-old black man would be easily dismissed by the system. He was betting that I wouldn't have the energy to fight. He was betting that the stigma of age would work in his favor. I read the document twice. I looked at the signature of the fake doctor. I looked at the date of the hearing. Monday morning, 9 a.m., family court. Most people would be terrified. Most people would be calling their lawyer in a panic, screaming about injustice. I put the paper down on the table. I walked over to the calendar on the wall. I circled Monday in red ink. I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a trap springing shut. Brad had just committed perjury. He had just committed medical fraud, and he had done it on public record. He wanted to prove I was incompetent. He wanted a show. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. "Hello, Zeke. Get the suit ready," I said. "The gray one. And call Dr. Henderson at the University Hospital. I need my full neurological workup from last month ready for Exhibit A." "Exhibit A," my lawyer asked. "What is happening?" "We are going to court," I said. Brad just made his final mistake. He thinks he is fighting a senile old man. He is about to find out he is fighting a structural engineer who has documented every single crack in his foundation. I walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The sun was coming out. "See you in court, son," I whispered. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the demolition man who just pressed the button. The family court mediation room was small, windowless, and smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. They call it a place of resolution, but I knew better. It was a demolition site. It was where families went to be torn apart brick by brick until nothing remained but dust and legal fees. I sat on the left side of the long mahogany table. Next to me was Henry, my lawyer. We had played poker together every Friday night for 20 years. Henry didn't say much. He was like an old suspension bridge, creaking and weathered, but he could hold more weight than anyone I knew. On the other side sat the demolition crew. Brad was wearing a navy blue sweater over a collared shirt. He had ditched the flashy linen suit. He was playing the role of the concerned son-in-law today. He looked humble. He looked sad. He looked like a man who was carrying the heavy burden of a senile relative. Next to him was Saul, his lawyer, a man whose suit was too shiny and whose smile was too sharp. And then there was Jasmine. My daughter sat between them, shrinking into her chair. She refused to look at me. She stared at a knot in the wood of the table as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. The mediator, a stern woman named Judge Reynolds, shuffled the papers in front of her. She looked tired. She had probably seen 1,000 Brads in her career. "Mr. Smith," the judge said, looking at Brad, "you have filed an emergency petition for conservatorship over Mr. Ezekiel Turner. You claim he is a danger to himself and his estate. That is a very serious allegation." Brad cleared his throat. He stood up. He put a hand over his heart. "Your Honor," he began, his voice trembling with practiced emotion, "this is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. Zeke, Mr. Turner, has been a father to me. We love him. But over the last year since his wife passed, we have seen a rapid decline." He paused for effect. He looked at me with pity. It started with small things, Brad continued. Forgetting where he put his keys, missing bill payments. But then it got worse. He started having conversations with people who aren't there. I stiffened. Henry put a hand on my arm to keep me steady. We have witness testimony, Saul interjected, sliding a paper across the table. Neighbors have heard Mr. Turner shouting in his house late at night, screaming at the walls, crying out to his dead wife. He believes she is still alive, Your Honor. He sets a place for her at the dinner table. He talks to her photo for hours. It is heartbreaking, but it is psychosis. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. Yes, I talked to Clara. I talked to her picture every night. I told her about my day. I told her I missed her. That wasn't madness. That was grief. That was love. Brad was twisting my mourning into a medical diagnosis. And then there is the financial recklessness, Brad added, gaining confidence. Last week, in a fit of confusion, he gave us his wife's wedding ring, a family heirloom. He told us to sell it for cash. He said the ring was cursed. He said he didn't want it in the house. Then the very next day he forgot he gave it to us and accused us of stealing it. He called the police. He locked us out of the house. He is paranoid, Your Honor. He is trapping us in his delusions. The judge looked at me. Her eyes were searching. Mr. Turner, she asked, did you give them the ring? I opened my mouth to speak, but Henry squeezed my arm. We will address that. Your Honor. Henry said, his voice like gravel. But first I would like to ask Mrs. Smith a question. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Jasmine. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. Jasmine, Henry said gently, you grew up in that house. You know your father. Do you believe in your heart that he is insane? Do you believe he forgot who you were? Brad nudged her under the table. I saw it. A sharp warning kick. Jasmine looked up. Her eyes met mine. For a second I saw the little girl I used to push on the swing set. I saw the daughter I paid tuition for. I saw the woman I walked down the aisle. I pleaded with her silently. Tell the truth, baby. Just tell the truth. Jasmine looked away. Her voice was a whisper. He gets confused, she said. The knife twisted in my back. My own daughter. She continued, her voice gaining a little more volume, reciting the script Brad must have drilled into her. He has changed, Your Honor. He is not the same man. He forgets things. I think he needs help. I think Brad should manage the accounts, for his own safety. There it was. The betrayal was complete. She had chosen the parasite over the host. Judge Reynolds nodded slowly. She made a note on her pad. It seems we have a corroborating family witness, she said. Mr. Turner, unless you have substantial evidence to the contrary, the court is inclined to grant a temporary evaluation order. This would freeze your assets for 30 days while a state-appointed doctor examines you. Brad smiled. It was a small, tight smile of victory. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over. Your Honor, Henry said, reaching into his briefcase. Before you rule, we would like to submit Exhibit B. Exhibit B, Saul asked, sneering. We haven't seen an Exhibit B. It was obtained recently, Henry said. He pulled out a small portable speaker. He placed it in the center of the table. Brad's smile faltered. He looked at the speaker. He looked at me. I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. I looked him dead in the eye. This is a recording taken 3 nights ago, Henry said. At the dinner table in Mr. Turner's home, the night Mr. Smith claims my client was having a psychotic episode. Henry pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. The acoustics of my dining room were, as I had told Brad, excellent. Brad's voice filled the courtroom. Arrogant, loud, clear. We needed the liquidity. I have debts. Okay, I made some bad calls on the market. We were drowning. That ring was a lifeline. We sold it because we deserve a future more than you deserve a memory. Jasmine gasped. Brad turned pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table. The recording continued. You want to know why, Zeke? Fine. Because it is useless. It is a rock. We took it, we sold it, and we spent it. Are you happy now? And then my voice on the tape. Calm. Steady. Did you know Jasmine? And Jasmine's voice. Yes, Dad. We needed the money. Brad said it was the only way. Henry pressed stop. The silence in the room was heavier than concrete. Judge Reynolds put down her pen. She looked at Brad. Her expression had changed from fatigue to disgust. Mr. Smith, the judge, said, her voice icy. This recording does not sound like a man who gave you a gift in a fit of confusion. This sounds like a confession of theft And it sounds like you just perjured yourself in my courtroom. Brad stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He was panicking. The walls were closing in. He looked at Saul, but Saul was busy shuffling papers, distancing himself from the sinking ship. That is taken out of context, Brad stammered. He was manipulating me. He goaded me into saying that. Sit down, Mr. Smith, the judge ordered. No, Brad yelled. He was losing control. The mask of the good son-in-law had fallen off, revealing the desperate rat beneath. You don't understand. He is evil. He hates us. He has always hated me. Brad looked at me. He saw that I wasn't angry. He saw that I was calm, and that terrified him. He needed to hurt me. He needed to destroy my credibility before the judge signed the order to dismiss. He needed a nuclear option. He didn't do it because he is crazy, Brad screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. He did it because he is afraid we will talk. Talk about what Mr. Smith, the judge, asked her patience gone. About what he did to Jasmine. Brad shouted. The lie formed in his mouth, desperate and vile. He didn't just forget things. He was abusive. He hit her. The room gasped. Jasmine's eyes went wide. She looked at her husband in horror. This wasn't part of the script. What Jasmine whispered. He beat her when she was a child. Brad yelled, his face red, spit flying from his lips. That is why she is so quiet. That is why she is afraid of him. He is a monster. We were trying to protect his reputation, but if he wants to play dirty, let's tell the truth. He abused my wife. I sat there frozen. I had expected greed. I had expected lies about my health. But this was a level of evil I hadn't calculated. He was accusing me of the one thing that would destroy a man's soul. He was accusing me of hurting the thing I loved most in the world. Judge Reynolds looked at Jasmine. Mrs. Smith, the judge asked, her voice very serious. Is this true? Did your father abuse you? I looked at my daughter. The air left the room. Everything stopped. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like a sledgehammer. Brad was panting, looking at Jasmine, his eyes wide and manic, silently begging her to back him up. Lie for me. Lie one more time. I looked at her too. I didn't beg. I didn't shake my head. I just waited to see if there was anything left of my daughter inside that shell. Jasmine opened her mouth. Her lip trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. The courtroom was silent. The echo of Jasmine's tears still hung in the air, a poisonous mist of lies. She had just accused me of the unthinkable to save her husband's skin. I looked at her huddled in her chair, unable to meet my eyes. I felt a crack in my heart that no amount of concrete could fix. But I didn't break. I looked at Henry. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time. Your Honor, Henry said, standing up slowly. We have one final witness. We call Mr. Avram Solomon to the stand. Brad let out a scoff. A jeweler. What is this show and tell? The bailiff opened the doors. Solomon walked in. He looked out of place in the sterile, fluorescent-lit room. He wore a tweed suit that was 30 years out of style and carried a leather satchel that looked like it had survived a war. But he walked with a dignity that silenced the room. He took the stand. He swore on the Old Testament. Mr. Solomon, Henry began. Please state your occupation. I am a gemologist, Solomon said, his voice grave. I specialize in estate jewelry and historical appraisals. And do you recognize the petitioner, Mr. Bradley Smith? Solomon adjusted his thick glasses. He looked at Brad. Yes. He came to my shop on Tuesday. He sold me a platinum engagement ring set with a 5-carat diamond. Brad rolled his eyes. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. We already admitted to selling the ring. We are here to discuss Mr. Turner's mental state, not his jewelry collection. Relevance, the judge asked, looking at Henry. The ring is the key to the mental state, Your Honor, Henry said. Not Mr. Turner's, but Mrs. Turner's. Henry turned back to Solomon. Mr. Solomon, was there anything unique about that ring? Yes, Solomon said. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the black velvet box. He placed it on the witness stand. The diamond caught the light. It was beautiful. It was painful to look at. This ring contains a laser inscription, Solomon said. Protocol Z, 1980. It references a document held in my safe for 10 years, a document written by the late Clara Turner. Brad shifted in his seat. He looked bored, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Henry approached the stand. He took a document from Solomon and handed it to the judge. Your Honor, this is the last will and testament regarding the personal effects of Clara Turner. It has a conditional clause. A trigger. The judge put on her reading glasses. She read the document silently. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked from the paper to me, then to Brad. Read the clause, please, Mr. Solomon, Henry said. Solomon unfolded his copy. He cleared his throat. I, Clara Turner, being of sound mind, do hereby establish the Turner Legacy Trust. This trust contains the assets of my independent real estate investments accumulated between 1980 and 2010. Brad snorted. Real estate investments. Mom was a housewife. She didn't work. Solomon ignored him. He continued reading. The contents of this trust are to remain dormant and secret until one of two conditions is met. Condition A. My husband Ezekiel passes away, at which point the trust passes to our daughter Jasmine. Brad sat up straighter. He heard the word trust. He heard the word Jasmine. He smelled money. Or, Solomon said, his voice hardening. Condition B. The engagement ring. The symbol of our union is sold for profit by any heir while my husband is still alive. The room went deadly quiet. Even the stenographer stopped typing. If the ring is sold, Solomon read, it is a declaration that the heir values quick currency over lasting family values. In this event, the heir is immediately and permanently disinherited. The full control of the trust and all its assets reverts solely to Ezekiel Turner to do with as he sees fit. Brad blinked. He looked confused. He leaned over to Saul. What does that mean? He whispered loudly. What trust? How much is in there? Henry turned to the judge. Your Honor, may we disclose the value of the Turner Legacy Trust as verified by the bank this morning? Proceed, the judge said. She looked stunned. Henry looked at Brad. He waited until he had eye contact. The trust contains the deeds to 3 commercial warehouses in downtown Chicago purchased in the 80s when the market was bottomed out. It also contains a diversified portfolio of blue-chip stocks. The total current valuation is $20,400,000. The number hung in the air. 20 million. I watched Brad. I watched the blood drain from his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish pulled onto a dock. Jasmine let out a small, strangled sound. She put her hand over her mouth. 20 million, Brad croaked. You see, Henry said, walking back to our table. Clara Turner was not just a housewife. She was a brilliant investor. She kept it quiet because she wanted her children to build their own way, not live off hers. She wanted you to have character, Mr. Smith. But you didn't want character. You wanted $800,000. Henry picked up the receipt from the jewelry store. You sold a $20 million legacy for less than 4% of its value. And in doing so, you triggered the clause that stripped you of everything. Brad stood up. He was shaking. His hands were clawing at the air. No, he whispered. No, that is not real. That is a lie. Mom didn't have money. She clipped coupons. She drove a used Honda. She was prudent, I said. My voice cut through his panic. She knew the difference between price and value, something you never learned. Brad looked at the judge. He looked at Saul. Saul had closed his briefcase. The lawyer knew a sinking ship when he saw one. Your Honor, Brad screamed. His voice was high and hysterical. This is entrapment. They set us up. He knew about the trust, and he tricked us into selling the ring, Mr. Smith, the judge said. Her voice disgusted. You just testified that you sold the ring because you needed liquidity. You testified that you made the decision. You cannot have it both ways. The document is valid. The condition has been met. Brad looked around the room. He looked at the walls as if they were closing in on him. He had lost the house. He had lost the lawsuit. And now he realized he had burned the winning lottery ticket. He turned to Jasmine. She was crying silently, her head in her hands. It is your fault, Brad hissed. Jasmine looked up, terrified. You... Brad screamed. He lunged at her. You stupid, useless cow. You told me to sell it. You said it was just a rock. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her violently. We could have had $20 million. Brad roared, his face purple with rage. 20 million. And we have nothing because of you. You sold it. You signed the paper. Hey, the bailiff shouted. 2 uniformed officers rushed forward. They grabbed Brad by the arms and hauled him off Jasmine. "Get off me!" Brad screamed, kicking and thrashing. He wasn't looking at the police. He was looking at Jasmine with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I hate you. You ruined my life. You and your crazy father." Jasmine shrank back, sobbing, curling into a ball in the witness chair. I watched him struggle. I saw the man my daughter had married. I saw the violence I knew was always there, lurking beneath the linen suits and the charm. "Order," the judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Smith, you are in contempt. Remove him." The officers dragged Brad toward the door. He was still screaming about the money, not about his wife, not about his marriage, about the money. 20 million. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The silence returned. But it was different now. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannon fire stops. Jasmine sat alone in the witness box. She looked small. She looked broken. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Henry said quietly, "we move for immediate dismissal of the competency petition. And we would like to submit a counter-petition for a restraining order against Mr. Bradley Smith." "Granted," the judge said. She looked at me. "Mr. Turner, I am sorry you had to go through this. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up my hat. I looked at Jasmine. She hadn't moved. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass by the witness stand. I stopped for a moment. Jasmine looked up at me. Her eyes were red, swollen, and full of fear. She waited for me to speak. She waited for me to say, "I told you so." Or maybe she waited for me to say, "It's okay." I didn't say either. I turned to Solomon. "Thank you, my friend," I said. "Keep the ring safe. I will pick it up tomorrow." I walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back at my daughter. She had made her choice. She had sold the ring. Now she had to live with the price. The court ruling was a gavel strike that shattered what was left of my family. I walked out of that building, a free man, a sane man, and the sole trustee of a $20 million empire. But as I sat in my truck watching the rain wash the city streets, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man standing in the rubble of a building he had to blow up to save the neighborhood. Brad was released on bail that afternoon. His lawyer Saul had pulled one last favor, probably knowing it was the last dime he would ever squeeze out of the Smith family. But Brad wasn't free. He was just moving from a cage of iron bars to a cage of his own making. I drove home. I sat in my armchair in the dark. I cleaned my shotgun. Not because I intended to use it, but because the rhythmic motion of disassembly and reassembly calmed my nerves. It is a mechanical process, rational, predictable, unlike people. Across town in the neon-lit purgatory of the Blue Moon Motel, the predictable collapse of Brad and Jasmine was accelerating. I know this because Miller, my private investigator, had a listening device in the room next door. He sent me the audio files. Listening to them was like listening to a bridge snapping cable by cable in a high wind. The recording started with a crash. Brad had thrown something, maybe the TV remote, maybe a lamp. "You stupid, useless woman," Brad screamed. His voice was raw, shredded by hours of yelling. $20 million. We had it. It was right there. And you sat there and cried. You let him humiliate me. "I didn't do anything," Jasmine sobbed. Her voice was thin, terrified. It sounded like the whimpering of a kicked dog. "You lied, Brad. You said he abused me. How could you say that?" "Because it was a strategy," Brad roared. "It is called leverage. But you are too weak to play the game. You are just like your father. Soft. Pathetic." Then came the knock at the door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't room service. The recording picked up 3 heavy, deliberate knocks. Thud. 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 The screaming stopped instantly. "Who is it?" Brad whispered. "Open up, Smith." The voice was low, gravelly. It belonged to a man who didn't care about court orders or inheritance laws. It belonged to the sharks collector. I heard the chain rattle. The door opened a crack. "You are late," Smith, the collector, said. "The shark is unhappy. The wire didn't go through. The $800,000 was clawed back by the firm. You have nothing. I need more time," Brad stammered. "I have a lawsuit pending. I have assets frozen. Just give me 48 hours. "You have 12, the collector said. 12 hours. Or we stop breaking furniture and start breaking knees." The door closed. The silence in the room was terrifying. Then Brad started to laugh. It was a manic, broken sound. 12 hours, he muttered. 12 hours. He turned to Jasmine. I could hear his footsteps pacing on the cheap carpet. He stopped in front of her. "Get up," he said. What Jasmine asked. "Get up. Fix your face. Put on that dress. The red one." "Why?" Jasmine asked, her voice trembling. "Because you are going to fix this," Brad hissed. "You are going to go to the payday lender on 5th Street, the one that doesn't check credit scores. You are going to use your maiden name, Turner. That name still has value even if you don't." "I can't," Jasmine cried. "I can't take out a loan. I don't have a job. They will arrest me for fraud." "I don't care," Brad screamed. He grabbed her. I heard the scuffle. I heard fabric tearing. "You are my wife. You are my property. You got us into this mess by selling that ring, and you are going to get us out. You will sign whatever papers they put in front of you, and if that isn't enough, I know some people downtown who pay very well for a pretty girl like you to host parties." "No," Jasmine screamed. "No, Brad, let me go." "You are going to do what I say," Brad snarled, "or I will throw you to the shark myself. Do you think I care about you? I married you for the portfolio. I married you for the inheritance. Without the money, you are nothing to me. Nothing." That was the snap. The final support beam gave way. I heard a struggle, a lamp crashing, a scream of pain, and then the sound of the motel door being wrenched open. Jasmine ran. She didn't take her purse. She didn't take a coat. She just ran out into the rain. I turned off the recording. I sat in the dark. I knew she was coming. Physics dictates that water flows to the lowest point and a child in trouble flows back to the parents. It took her an hour. The storm had turned into a deluge. Thunder shook the windows of my house. I watched the streetlights flicker. Then I saw her. She was walking up the driveway. She was soaked to the bone. Her expensive dress was ruined, clinging to her frame. She was shivering so violently I could see it from the window. She looked like a ghost. She didn't ring the bell. She pounded on the door with her fist. Dad, please, open up." I sat in my chair. My heart wanted to leap out of my chest. Every instinct I had as a father screamed at me to run to the door, to pull her inside, to wrap her in a blanket and make her hot cocoa. I wanted to kill Brad for what he said. I wanted to save my little girl. But I looked at the empty spot on the mantelpiece where the ring box used to sit. I looked at the legal papers on my desk where she had accused me of abuse. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the door. "Dad, he is going to kill me," Jasmine screamed. "He is crazy. Please, I am sorry. I am so sorry." I unlocked the deadbolt. Click. I turned the handle. I opened the door. But I had engaged the security chain. The heavy steel chain I had installed myself. It allowed the door to open only 4 inches. Jasmine's face appeared in the gap. She was a mess. Mascara ran down her face like black tears. Her lip was bleeding. She reached a hand through the gap, trying to grab me. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Let me in. It is cold. I have nowhere to go." I looked at her. I didn't look with anger. I looked with the cold, detached assessment of an engineer inspecting a condemned building. "You chose your shelter, Jasmine," I said softly. "No, Dad. Please," she begged. "I made a mistake. I was stupid. I will do anything. Just let me in. I am your daughter." I looked at her hand reaching through the door. The finger where the ring should have been was bare. "My daughter knew the value of loyalty," I said. "My daughter would never have sold her mother's memory for a vacation. My daughter would never have stood in a courtroom and called me a monster." "I am sorry," she wailed. "I was scared. He made me do it." "He didn't make you sell the ring, Jasmine," I said. "You wanted the money. You wanted the easy life. You thought I was just an old obstacle in your way. Well, the obstacle is gone, and so is the safety net." "Dad, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am your flesh and blood." "Blood doesn't make you family," I said. "Loyalty makes you family. Respect makes you family. You broke the contract, Jasmine. You demolished the foundation." I started to close the door. "No, no, no," she screamed, jamming her shoulder against the wood. "Don't do this. He is coming for me. The loan sharks are coming." "Then I suggest you start running," I said. I looked her in the eye one last time. "The person who sold Clara's ring does not have a home here," I said. "You have the wrong house, ma'am." I pushed the door shut. It clicked. I threw the deadbolt. I heard her scream. A primal, agonized sound that tore through the wood. I heard her slump against the door sobbing. I heard her fists beating weakly against the finish. I stood there for a long time, my hand on the lock. Tears streamed down my face. I was crying. I was broken. But I didn't open the door. Because sometimes to save a person, you have to let them hit the bottom. You have to let them feel the cold concrete of reality. If I opened that door, she would never learn. She would always think that betrayal carries no price. She would always think that Daddy would fix it. I wasn't fixing it this time. I was teaching her how to survive the wreckage she had created. I walked back to my chair. I picked up the picture of Clara. "I did it, Clara," I whispered. "It was the hardest thing I ever had to do." Outside, the rain continued to fall. Eventually, the sobbing stopped. I heard footsteps walking away down the driveway into the dark. Desperation has a smell. It smells like sour sweat, cheap alcohol, and rain. I could smell Brad before I saw him. I was sitting in my leather armchair in the corner of the living room. The lights were off. The curtains were drawn. The only illumination came from the street lights filtering through the cracks, painting long, thin stripes of gray across the floor. On the small table next to me sat a glass of water and my Colt 1911. It was a relic from my time in the service. Heavy steel, cold to the touch. It hadn't been fired in 20 years, but I cleaned it every Sunday. A structural engineer knows that maintenance is the difference between a tool that works and a tool that fails. Tonight, failure was not an option. I knew he would come. I had calculated the variables. The loan sharks gave him 12 hours. Jasmine had failed to get the money. His assets were frozen. He had no friends left. The only variable remaining in his fractured mind was the belief that I was hoarding cash in the house. He thought there was a secret stash, a hidden safe full of gold bars or stacks of bills. He was wrong, of course. My wealth was in the foundation, in the stocks, in the legal documents that now choked him. But a drowning man will grab at a blade of grass if he thinks it will keep him afloat. At 2:14 in the morning, the motion sensor on the back porch silently alerted my phone. A single vibration. I didn't look at the screen. I knew what it was. I picked up the Colt. I disengaged the safety. The click was the loudest sound in the house. I heard the glass break. It wasn't a clean break. It was clumsy. He must have used a rock from the garden. The sound of shattering glass followed by the dull thud of a heavy boot hitting the floorboards. He was inside. I controlled my breathing. In, out, steady. My heart rate didn't spike. This wasn't fear. This was execution. I heard his wet shoes squeak on the hardwood. He was breathing hard, ragged gasps like a man running a marathon. He moved into the kitchen. I heard drawers being ripped open, clatter of silverware. He was looking for a weapon. He didn't bring a gun. Good. That meant he was impulsive. That meant he was sloppy. He moved into the hallway. I saw the beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. It swung wildly, illuminating the photos on the wall, the empty space where the ring box used to be. He was muttering to himself. "Where is it? Where is the money? You hold out on me. I will kill you." He walked into the living room. The beam of light swept across the sofa, then the fireplace. Then it hit me. I didn't blink. I sat perfectly still, the gun resting on the arm of the chair leveled directly at his chest. The light blinded me for a second, but I didn't move. "Hello, Brad," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a foreman telling a worker he is fired. Brad screamed. He jumped back, dropping the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, casting weird dancing shadows on the walls. In the chaotic light, I saw him. He was soaking wet. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, and in his right hand he held a 10-inch carving knife he had taken from my kitchen block. "You," Brad hissed. He raised the knife. "You are awake." "I never sleep when there is a pest in the house," I said. "Where is it?" Brad yelled. He took a step toward me. The knife trembled in his hand. "Where is the cash?" "I know you have it. You have a safe. Jasmine told me. Give me the combination." "There is no cash." "Brad," I said. "The safe contains deeds, trust documents, insurance policies, things that have value to a man with a future." "You don't have a future." "Liar," he screamed. He lunged forward another step. "I need that money. They're going to kill me. You have to save me. You owe me. I was your son. You were a parasite." I corrected him. "And I have fumigated the house." He looked at the gun. For a second, reality tried to pierce through his delusion. He saw the barrel. He saw the finger on the trigger. But desperation is a powerful drug. It overrides survival instincts. "You won't shoot me," Brad said, a twisted smile forming on his lips. "You are a church-going man, Zeke. You are a pillar of the community. You won't shoot your daughter's husband in cold blood." I stood up slowly. I kept the gun trained on his center of mass. You are right, I said. I am a man of faith, but I am also a man of the law. And you seem to have forgotten geography, Brad. What he asked, confused. Look around you, I said. This isn't Disneyland. This isn't a debate club. This is Texas. In this state, we have a doctrine. It says that a man's home is his castle. And if an intruder breaks in at night with a weapon, the law doesn't ask questions. It just calls the coroner. I pulled back the hammer of the gun. The metallic sound echoed in the room. Drop the knife, Brad, or I will repaint the wall behind you. Brad froze. He looked at the gun. He looked at my eyes. He realized for the first time that the gentle old man who cooked gumbo was gone. In his place stood a man who had survived. Jim Crow survived poverty and survived the death of his wife, a man made of steel. He lowered the knife an inch. Zeke, please, he whimpered. Just give me 5,000. Anything. I can't go back out there. You aren't going back out there, I said. Suddenly the room was flooded with blue and red light from the windows. The front yard was ablaze with flashing sirens. Brad spun around. What did you do? He screamed. I installed a silent alarm 3 days ago, I said. It triggers the moment glass breaks. They have been here for 2 minutes, Brad. They were just waiting for you to threaten me so the charges would stick. The front door burst open. Police dropped the weapon. 3 officers stormed in, guns drawn. Their tactical lights blinded Brad. Drop it. Now. Brad looked at the police. He looked at me. He looked at the knife. For a split second, I thought he was going to try something. I tightened my finger on the trigger. But cowardice won. He dropped the knife. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. He fell to his knees. He put his hands on his head. He started to sob. Great, heaving sobs of a man who knows it is over. Officer Miller stepped forward. He kicked the knife away. He grabbed Brad's arms and wrenched them behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. Bradley Smith, you are under arrest for breaking and entering attempted robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. They hauled him up. Brad looked at me as they dragged him toward the door. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked small, defeated. Zeke, he cried out. Zeke, tell them. Tell them I am family. I lowered the gun. I engaged the safety. I looked at him with zero emotion. I don't know this man, I said to Officer Miller. Get him out of my house. They dragged him out into the rain. I watched from the window as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. He pressed his face against the glass, looking back at the mansion he thought he would inherit. Now the only house he would live in would have bars on the windows and a toilet in the corner. I turned away from the window. I looked at the broken glass on the floor. I looked at the knife lying there. I felt a deep, exhausting weariness settle over me. But it was a good kind of tired. It was the feeling you get after a long day of demolition when the dangerous structure is finally down and the dust is starting to settle. I walked to the kitchen. I poured the glass of water down the sink. I picked up the phone. I had one more call to make, not to Jasmine, not to the lawyer, to the contractor. I needed a new window, and I needed it to be bulletproof. The county jail is a gray box made of concrete and steel reinforced bars. I know the architect who designed it. He told me once that the goal of a prison is not to keep people in, but to keep reality out. For Brad, reality was a 6x8 cell with a stainless steel toilet and a roommate named Tank who didn't like chatter. But for Jasmine, the prison was different. Her prison had no bars. Her prison was the terrifying, suffocating freedom of having absolutely nothing. I kept tabs on them. Miller, my private investigator, was worth every penny. He told me that Jasmine had crashed on a friend's couch for 2 days before the friend politely asked her to leave. Toxicity is contagious, and nobody wants to catch a lawsuit. On her 3rd day of homelessness, Brad called her from the jail. Miller got the recording. It was a collect call. The automated voice announced an inmate from the county detention center. Jasmine accepted the charges even though she didn't have a dime to pay the bill. Old habits die hard. She was still programmed to answer him. Jasmine Brad hissed into the phone. The desperation was gone, replaced by a cold, venomous rage. You need to get me out. You need to call my parents. You need to call everyone. I can't. Jasmine whispered. Her voice sounded hollow. Dead. Your parents hung up on me, Brad. They said you stole from them too. They said you forged your mother's signature on a car loan. Lies, Brad screamed. The audio cracked. They are all lying. Listen to me. Go to the storage unit, the one on Elm Street. There is a box of watches. Sell them. It should be enough for bail. There is no box, Jasmine said. I went there. The unit was auctioned off last month because you stopped paying the rent. It is empty, Brad. It is all empty. Silence on the line. Then the true nature of the parasite revealed itself. "You are useless," Brad spat. "I should have married your father. At least he has assets. You are just a spoiled brat with a bankrupt last name. If you don't get me out of here, I will tell the cops you were in on the embezzlement. I will tell them you planned it. I will drag you down with me, Jasmine. I swear it." Jasmine hung up. That was the moment. The click of the receiver was the sound of the spell breaking. She sat on a park bench in the rain, staring at the phone. She realized that the man she had betrayed her father for didn't love her. He didn't even like her. He viewed her as a resource, and now that the resource was dry, he was ready to discard the husk. But the universe wasn't done teaching Jasmine a lesson. The next day, she went to the bank to try and open a personal account. She wanted to deposit her last $50. The teller, a young woman her own age, looked at the screen and frowned. "I am sorry, Mrs. Smith," the teller said. "We can't open an account for you." "Why not?" Jasmine asked. "Because of the outstanding debts," the teller explained. "You are co-signed on 3 defaulted business loans. There is a lien on your credit for unpaid taxes. And your credit score is, well, it is below 400. You are listed as a high-risk liability." Jasmine staggered back from the counter. Brad hadn't just spent his own money. He had used her identity. He had forged her signature on loans she didn't know existed. She wasn't just broke. She was $500,000 in debt. She was drowning in an ocean she hadn't even dipped her toe in. She walked out of the bank. She had no husband, no father, no home, no credit. And for the first time in her life, no options. Most people would crumble. And she did. She sat on the curb and wept until she threw up. But hunger is a powerful motivator. It overrides pride. It overrides grief. She needed money, not for a vacation, not for a handbag, for a sandwich. She walked past the boutiques where she used to shop. She walked past the salons where she used to get her nails done. She walked until her feet blistered in her designer heels. She walked to the part of town where the neon signs buzzed and the air smelled of grease. She stopped in front of a diner called the Rusty Spoon. It was a truck stop dive, the kind of place I used to eat at after a long shift pouring concrete. The Help Wanted sign was taped to the window with Scotch tape. Jasmine went inside. The manager was a large woman named Big Sal who had arms like tree trunks and zero patience for nonsense. She looked Jasmine up and down. She looked at the ruined silk dress. She looked at the manicured nails. "You ever worked a day in your life?" Princess Sal asked. "No," Jasmine whispered. Sal laughed. It sounded like a chainsaw starting up. "Well, we are short-staffed. $6 an hour plus tips. If you drop a plate, it comes out of your pay. If you are rude to a trucker, you are fired. Here is your apron. Go wash those dishes." I parked my truck across the street that night. I pulled my hat down low. I watched through the window. I saw my daughter. The girl who had grown up with piano lessons and private tutors. The girl who had sneered at my work boots. She was standing at a sink full of gray, greasy water. Steam billowed around her face, ruining her hair. She was scrubbing plates. Her hands, those soft hands that had never held anything heavier than a credit card, were red and raw. I watched her slip on the wet floor. She caught herself, but a stack of saucers crashed down. I saw Big Sal scream at her. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Jasmine flinch. I saw her shoulders hunch. I saw her mouth the words, "I am sorry." She bent down to pick up the broken ceramic. She cut her finger. She didn't cry out. She just wrapped a napkin around it and kept working. A customer at the counter, a man with grease under his fingernails, waved his coffee cup at her. Jasmine rushed over. She poured the coffee. Her hand was shaking. She spilled a little on the counter. The man yelled at her. He pointed a finger in her face. I gripped the steering wheel of my truck. My knuckles turned white. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go in there, to tell that man to back off, to throw a stack of hundreds on the counter and take my daughter home. But I stayed in the truck. I remembered the days when I was 20, digging ditches in the summer heat, my hands bleeding, my back screaming. I did it so she wouldn't have to. But because she didn't have to, she never respected it. She thought money was magic. She thought comfort was a birthright. Now she was learning the physics of survival. She was learning that a dollar represents a unit of suffering. She was learning that respect is earned by how much weight you can carry, not how much you can spend. She worked for 8 hours. She didn't take a break. I watched her limp to the back alley to take out the trash. The bag was heavy. It dragged on the ground. She heaved it into the dumpster, gasping for air. She leaned against the brick wall. She slid down until she was sitting on the dirty pavement. She looked at her hands. Her nails were broken. Her skin was scalded. She pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket. It was a napkin. She had written something on it during her shift. I zoomed in with the binoculars I kept in the glove box. It was a letter. Dear Brad. She took a pen from her apron. She wrote furiously, I am filing for divorce. I have nothing left. You took my money. You took my home. You took my father, but you didn't take my name. I am a Turner, and Turners do not break. Do not call me. Do not write to me. I hope the judge gives you every year you deserve. She signed it. Jasmine Turner. She didn't sign it Jasmine Smith. She folded the napkin. She put it in an envelope she had scavenged from the office trash. She licked the stamp she must have bought with her first tip. She stood up. She wiped her face with her apron. She looked different. She looked tired, yes. She looked beaten, yes. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Grit. She walked back inside the diner. She picked up the coffee pot. She went back to work. I started my truck. The engine rumbled. I didn't go in. I didn't wave. Not yet. She was building a foundation. It was just the first layer of concrete, and it was wet and messy. But it was hers. She was pouring it herself. And until that foundation cured, until it hardened into something that could support the weight of a real life, I had to stay away. I drove home to my empty house. I walked into the kitchen. I looked at the spot on the floor where Brad had attacked me. I looked at the table where we had eaten the gumbo. I sat down and pulled out a piece of stationery. Clara's stationery. I wrote a single line. To the warden of the county jail, please ensure inmate Bradley Smith receives the enclosed divorce petition. Legal fees have been paid by an anonymous donor. I put a money order in the envelope. I didn't pay for her lawyer. I paid for the process server. I sealed it. My daughter was scrubbing dishes. My son-in-law was scrubbing toilets in a cell. And I was scrubbing the stain of their betrayal from my life. But as I looked at the rain falling outside, I felt a flicker of hope. Jasmine hadn't run back to Brad. She hadn't tried to call me to beg for money again. She had gotten a job. A terrible, hard, humiliating job. That was the first step. The diamond was gone. But maybe, just maybe, the pressure was finally starting to create a real gem. Reclaiming property is a legal term. It implies a transaction, a swapping of funds for goods. But when I walked back into Solomon's shop on 47th Street, I wasn't there to conduct a transaction. I was there to perform a rescue mission. I was there to bring my wife home. The shop was quiet, just as it had been the first time. Solomon was polishing a silver tea set behind the counter. He looked up as the bell chimed. He didn't smile. He simply reached under the counter and pulled out the black velvet box. It is safe, Solomon said. I kept it in the main vault. I pulled out my checkbook, not the trust checkbook, my personal one. The one connected to my pension and the savings I had scraped together over 40 years of engineering work. I wrote a check for $800,000. It was almost everything I had in liquid cash. It was my retirement safety net. But I didn't hesitate. My hand was steady as I wrote the zeros. Mr. Turner, Solomon said softly, looking at the check, you do not have to do this. The trust could cover it. You are the sole beneficiary now. No, I said. The trust is for the future. This ring belongs to the past, and I pay for my own past. I handed him the check. He handed me the box. The weight of it surprised me. 5 carats of diamond and a band of platinum shouldn't weigh more than a few grams. But as I held it in my palm, it felt heavier than a steel girder. It held the weight of a marriage. It held the weight of a betrayal. And it held the weight of a secret that Clara had carried to her grave. I drove home with the box on the passenger seat. I didn't turn on the radio. I listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. My mind drifted back. It traveled back 10 years to a night I hadn't thought about in a long time. We were in the kitchen. It was late. The house was quiet. Jasmine had just come home from college for the weekend. She had brought Brad with her. It was the first time we had met him. He was charming then, full of big ideas and expensive cologne. But after they went to bed, I found Clara sitting at the kitchen table. She wasn't drinking tea. She was crying. Clara was a strong woman. She was the steel in our family's concrete. Seeing her cry was like seeing a crack in a dam. What is it, baby? I had asked, sitting down beside her. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. She was holding this very ring in her hand. She was twisting it round and round. We are losing her, Zeke, she whispered. I frowned. Who? Jasmine. She is right upstairs. She is fine. She is in love. No, Clara said, shaking her head. That is not love. That is infatuation with a lifestyle. Did you see how she looked at me when I served dinner? She looked embarrassed, Zeke. She looked at my hands, my rough hands, and she hid them from Brad. She is ashamed of us. You are imagining things, I said, trying to comfort her. I am not, Clara insisted. She slammed the ring down on the table. And that boy, Brad, he didn't ask you a single question about your life. He only asked about the house. He asked about the square footage. He asked about the property value. He is a surveyor, Zeke, but he isn't measuring land. He is measuring our worth. He is calculating how much he can extract. I didn't want to believe her then. I wanted to be the happy father. I wanted to believe my daughter had found a good man. Clara wiped her eyes. Her face hardened. That was the moment the investor in her took over. The woman who had turned pennies into millions in the real estate market. I am going to protect her, Clara said. But I have to protect her from herself. If she marries him, he will drain her. He will take everything we give her. So we have to give her nothing that he can steal. That night she outlined the plan. The ghost trust. The ring clause. I thought she was being paranoid. I told her she was being too hard. She looked at me, her eyes fierce. Zeke, she said, if I am wrong, then the ring stays in the box and they live happily ever after. But if I am right, this ring will be the only thing that saves you from the poorhouse. Promise me. Promise me you will let the trap work. I promised. And then I forgot. Because it is easier to forget the dark possibilities than to live with them. Now 10 years later, sitting in my empty house, I realized she had been right about everything. She had seen the termite infestation before I even saw the wood. I walked into the living room. The spot where Brad had threatened me with a knife was clean now. I had scrubbed the floor myself. I sat in my armchair. The house was silent. No screams, no sirens, just the settling of the foundation. I opened the box. The diamonds sparked in the afternoon sun. I pulled out the folded letter that Solomon had given me, along with the ring. It was the second letter, the one to be read only after the ring was recovered. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky. She must have written this near the end when the sickness was taking her strength. My dearest Zeke, if you are holding this letter, it means the worst has happened. It means the ring was sold. It means Jasmine chose the counterfeit shine of quick money over the true brilliance of loyalty. I know you are hurting right now. I know you are sitting in that big chair feeling like you failed as a father. You are wondering where we went wrong. You are wondering if we loved her too much or not enough. Stop it. We didn't fail, Zeke. We built a strong house. But even the best house cannot stand if the people living inside it decide to tear down the walls for firewood. You are going to want to save her. I know you. You are going to want to take this money, this $20 million that is now yours, and you are going to want to bail her out. You are going to want to pay her debts. You are going to want to buy her a house. Don't. Zeke, listen to me. To love a child is to let them stand on their own 2 feet, and sometimes standing means falling first. If you catch her now, she will never learn to walk. She will only learn that daddy is a crutch, and a crutch eventually breaks. Let her fall. Let her scrape her knees. Let her feel the cold. It is the only way she will find the fire inside herself. If she is truly our daughter, she will rise. If she is not, then no amount of money will save her. But the money, Zeke, the money must not sit idle. Money is like concrete. If you don't pour it, it hardens and becomes useless. Use it. Build something. Build something for the ones who didn't have a father like you. Build something for the boys and girls who have grease under their fingernails and geometry in their heads but empty pockets. Build the future we talked about. I love you, my structural engineer. You were the only thing in my life that never buckled under pressure. Stay strong. Love, Clara. I lowered the letter. Tears ran down my face, hot and fast. I let them fall. I didn't wipe them away. She was right. She was always right. I looked at the ring again. It wasn't just a symbol of our marriage anymore. It was a seed. I stood up. I walked to my desk. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer, Henry. Henry, I said. My voice was thick, but it was steady. Zeke, are you okay? I am fine, Henry. I am better than fine. I have a job for you. Okay. What is it? I want to start a foundation, I said. A new one. Okay. Zeke, what do you want to call it? Call it the Clara Turner Initiative, I said. And what is the mission? I looked out the window. I thought about Jasmine scrubbing dishes at the diner. I thought about the kids in my old neighborhood looking at skyscrapers and wondering how they were held up. Scholarships, I said. Full-ride scholarships for engineering students, but not just any students. I want the ones from the bottom, the ones who work night shifts to pay for books, the ones who know the value of $1 because they have had to sweat for every single one. I want to find the builders, Henry. I want to find the ones who know that you can't cheat gravity. Henry paused. That is a beautiful legacy, Zeke. And the capital? I looked at the ring. $20 million, I said. Plus 1 diamond ring. I want you to sell the ring, Henry. Sell it. But Zeke, you just bought it back. I know, I said. But Clara doesn't need it. And I don't need it to remember her. I have her in my heart. I want you to auction it off. And I want every penny of that sale to go to the first student we accept. I hung up the phone. I felt lighter. The heaviness in my chest was gone. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a construction site. And for the first time in a year, I was ready to get back to work. Concrete takes 28 days to reach its full structural strength. In the trade, we call it the curing process. You pour the wet mixture, you smooth it out, and then you have to wait. You cannot rush it. If you put weight on it too soon, it cracks. If you try to heat it up to dry it faster, it becomes brittle. You have to let it sit in the dark. Let the chemical reactions happen. Let the water evaporate until what was once a mess of sand and gravel becomes rock hard. It has been 365 days since I closed the door on my daughter Jasmine. A full year of curing. My life has found a new rhythm. The Clara Turner Initiative is running at full capacity. I have 12 young men and women on full scholarships now, kids from the South Side who know how to weld but never knew they could design the bridge. I spend my days reviewing their grades, visiting their workshops, and teaching them that a straight line on a blueprint represents a promise kept in steel. But at night, the house is still quiet. I haven't spoken to Jasmine. I haven't heard her voice. I changed my number, but I kept the P.O. box for the foundation open. Miller, my private investigator, sends me monthly reports. They are short, no drama, no arrests, just the mundane, brutal log of a woman learning to survive. Jasmine lives in a studio apartment on the east side now. It is above a laundromat. The rent is $600 a month. The report says the radiator clanks and the window overlooks an alley full of stray cats. She works 2 jobs. Morning shift at the diner, night shift cleaning offices downtown. She isn't Jasmine the socialite anymore. She is just Jasmine. Last Tuesday, I received an envelope in the mail. It had no return address. The handwriting was familiar, but it had changed. It used to be loopy and decorative, the handwriting of a girl who signed birthday cards with hearts. Now the letters were small, cramped, and efficient. I took the envelope to my study. I sat at the desk where Brad had once tried to bully me. I used my letter opener to slit the top. Inside there was no letter, no long apology, no excuses, no begging for a second chance. There was just a check, and a small yellow sticky note. I pulled out the check first. It was a cashier's check from a local credit union. Pay to the order of Ezekiel Turner. Amount, $50.00. I stared at it. $50. To a man with $20 million in the bank, $50 is a rounding error. It is the cost of a steak dinner. It is nothing. But I looked at the date on the check. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Jasmine Turner. I calculated what $50 meant to her now. Based on her wages at the diner, after taxes, that was almost 8 hours of standing on her feet. That was 8 hours of scrubbing grease, serving coffee, and being yelled at by strangers. That was a week of groceries for her. She hadn't sent me spare change. She had sent me blood money. I picked up the yellow sticky note. I will pay it all back, even if it takes a lifetime. Thank you for saving me from myself. I sat there for a long time. The sun went down and the room turned gray, but I didn't turn on the light. I held that piece of paper. I remembered the girl who threw a tantrum because her new BMW was the wrong shade of white. I remembered the woman who stood in a courtroom and lied about abuse to protect a thief. That woman was dead. The woman who wrote this check was someone else. She was someone who understood the value of a debt. I didn't cash the check. I opened my desk drawer and took out a simple black frame. I placed the check and the sticky note inside it. I hung it on the wall right next to Clara's picture. It was the most valuable piece of art I owned. It was the first proof that the foundation was finally setting. But a structural engineer verifies his data. I couldn't just trust the paper, I needed to see the structure with my own eyes. 2 nights later, I drove my truck to the east side. It was raining again, a light, misty drizzle that made the neon signs blur. I parked across the street from the office building where Jasmine worked the night shift. It was 11 p.m. The city was asleep, but the cleaning crews were just finishing up. I saw the side door open. A group of women walked out wearing gray uniforms. They looked tired. They were laughing about something, lighting cigarettes, rushing to catch the late bus. And then I saw her. Jasmine walked out last. She was wearing the gray uniform, but it was too big for her. She had lost weight, a lot of weight. Her cheekbones were sharp. Her hair, once blown out and highlighted, was pulled back in a severe practical bun. She wore no makeup. She didn't look like a princess. She looked like a worker. She didn't light a cigarette. She didn't laugh. She adjusted her backpack and started walking. I followed her in the truck, keeping my distance. She didn't take a taxi. She walked 6 blocks to the bus stop. She sat on the bench under the flickering streetlight. She reached into her bag and pulled out a book. I squinted through the rain. It wasn't a fashion magazine. It wasn't a romance novel. It was a textbook. Introduction to Civil Engineering. My breath caught in my throat. She was reading. She was studying. A car drove past the bus stop, splashing water onto the sidewalk. Jasmine didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just pulled her legs in, wiped the water off her book, and kept reading. She had grit. I wanted to honk. I wanted to roll down the window and yell, "Get in the car, baby. Daddy is here. You don't have to do this anymore." My hand hovered over the door handle. It would be so easy. I could end her struggle right now. I could take her home to her warm bed. I could feed her. I could give her the money she needed. But then I heard Clara's voice in my head. "If you catch her now, she will never learn to walk." I pulled my hand back. Jasmine didn't need a savior. She was saving herself. If I intervened now, I would be robbing her of her victory. I would be telling her that she wasn't strong enough to make it on her own. The bus arrived. It hissed to a halt. Jasmine climbed on board. I watched her pay the fare, counting out coins from her pocket. She walked to the back and sat down. She opened the book again. I watched the bus pull away, its tail lights fading into the wet darkness. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of pride. My daughter was poor. She was tired. She was alone. But she was dignified. I drove home slowly. I walked into my study and looked at the framed check on the wall. $50. It was a small down payment on a $20 million soul, but the payments were being made. I sat down at my desk. I opened the foundation's ledger. I found the entry for the scholarship fund. I didn't call her. But I did something else. I wrote a letter to the dean of the City College Engineering Department. I told him that the Clara Turner Initiative was looking to sponsor an anonymous night school grant for promising students who were working full-time. I told him to look for students who were paying in cash, students who were struggling but showing up. I didn't give him her name. I would let the system work. If she had the grades, she would get the help, but she would have to earn it. I turned off the lamp. "Good night, Jasmine," I whispered to the empty room. "Keep walking. You are almost there." The concrete is hardening. The cracks are filling in. The grand hall of the city library is a masterpiece of architecture. High vaulted ceilings, marble columns, acoustics that make a whisper sound like a prayer. Tonight it was filled with people. There were flashes of cameras, the hum of polite conversation, and the clinking of champagne flutes. But the people who mattered most to me weren't the donors in their tuxedos or the politicians shaking hands. The people who mattered were the 12 young men and women sitting in the front row. They wore ill-fitting suits they had probably bought at a thrift store. Their hands were rough. Their shoes were scuffed. They looked nervous. They looked like me 50 years ago. I stood at the podium. The lights blinded me for a moment. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I felt the ghost of Clara standing next to me, her hand resting on my shoulder, whispering, "Tell them the truth, Zeke." I cleared my throat. The room went silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began. My voice echoed off the stone walls. "We are here to talk about foundations. In engineering, the foundation is the part of the building you never see. It is buried in the dirt. It lives in the dark. It bears the crushing weight of everything above it without complaint. I looked at the students in the front row. You are the foundation, I said. You are the ones who know that cement doesn't set overnight. You know that steel is forged in fire, not in comfort. My wife Clara knew this. She didn't leave a legacy of comfort. She left a legacy of work. Applause broke out. I waited for it to die down. I scanned the room. My eyes traveled past the bright lights, past the wealthy donors in the middle rows, all the way to the back of the hall, to the shadows near the exit doors. That was when I saw her. She was standing in the very last row, half hidden behind a marble pillar. She wasn't wearing a gala dress. She was wearing a simple gray coat that looked too thin for the winter weather. Her hair was pulled back. She looked tired. She looked older than her 29 years. It was Jasmine. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't the panic I used to feel. It was a heavy, thudding recognition. She hadn't come to beg. If she wanted to beg, she would have pushed to the front. She would have made a scene. She was hiding. She had come just to listen. I faltered for a second in my speech. I gripped the sides of the podium. We build, I continued, my voice slightly rougher. We build not to hide our mistakes, but to rise above them. We build because if we don't, the roof caves in. And sometimes the hardest thing to build is not a bridge or a skyscraper. It is a second chance. I looked directly at her. She saw me looking. She froze. I saw her shrink back, clutching her cheap purse, ready to bolt. I finished my speech. Thank you. The room erupted in applause. The dean walked over to shake my hand. The mayor was waving at me. I ignored them all. I stepped down from the podium. I didn't go to the VIP table. I didn't stop for photographs. I walked down the center aisle. Mr. Turner, someone asked. Zeke. I kept walking. The crowd parted. They sensed the intensity of my movement. I walked past the students. I walked past the cameras. I walked straight toward the back of the room. Jasmine saw me coming. Panic flared in her eyes. She turned to the door. She pushed it open, trying to escape into the night. Jasmine, I called out. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the room like a laser. She stopped. Her hand was on the brass handle of the door. She stood there for a long second, her back to me, shoulders shaking. Then slowly she turned around. The lobby was empty except for us. The gala was buzzing inside the hall a world away. I walked up to her. I stopped 3 feet away. I looked at her. Up close, the damage was visible. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were chapped from the cold and the dishwater. She wasn't the princess anymore. She was a survivor. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. She looked at the floor. I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to hear you speak. I am leaving now." She turned to go. "Wait," I said. I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo. Jasmine flinched. She thought I was going to pull out a legal document, or maybe a restraining order. I pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It was the check she had sent me, the check for $50. I held it up. Jasmine stared at it. Her face flushed red with shame. "It is not much," she stammered. "I know. It is a joke compared to what I lost. I will send more next week." I picked up an extra shift at the diner. I looked at the check. Then I looked at her. $50. I said, my voice stern. "Yes," she whispered. I took a step closer. I loomed over her. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. $50 is not enough interest, Jasmine," I said. She broke. A sob escaped her throat. She covered her face with her hands. "I know," she cried. "I know, Dad. I am sorry. I can never pay it back. I ruined everything." I reached out. I took her hands and pulled them away from her face. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out my white linen handkerchief. Clara had embroidered my initials on it. I handed it to her. "Wipe your face," I said gently. She took it. She wiped her eyes, trembling. I held up the check again. "You didn't let me finish," I said. She looked at me confused. $50 is not enough interest on a $20 million loss, I said. Mathematically, it is a bad return. I paused. I looked her right in the eye. "But this $50, I said, tapping the paper, it is worth more to me than that diamond ring ever was." Jasmine blinked. "What?" "Because this is clean money," I said. "You didn't lie for this. You didn't steal for this. You stood on your feet for 8 hours for this. You burned your hands for this. This $50 has sweat on it. It has dignity on it. I folded the check and put it back in my pocket right over my heart. I am framing this, I said, and when you send the next one, I will frame that too. Jasmine stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Then she launched herself at me. She buried her face in my chest. She hugged me so tight I thought she would crack my ribs. She smelled like rain and cheap soap, but to me she smelled like my daughter. I wrapped my arms around her. I held her. I felt the concrete of my heart finally settle. I missed you, Daddy, she sobbed into my tuxedo. I missed you too, baby, I whispered. We stood there for a long time. The guests started to file out of the hall. They looked at us. The wealthy philanthropist hugging the woman in the worn-out coat. They whispered. I didn't care. Let them look. They were seeing a real restoration project in progress. Come on, I said, pulling away. Where, she asked, wiping her face. I am walking you to the bus stop, I said. She looked surprised. You aren't going to drive me? No, I said. You have a shift in the morning, don't you? Yes, she said. 6 a.m. Then you need to catch the number 12 bus, I said. We walked out of the library into the cold night air. The city lights were bright. We walked side by side. Dad, she asked after a moment, can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you open the door that night? The night I came back in the rain. I stopped walking. I looked at the skyscrapers around us. Because, Jasmine, I said, if I had opened the door, you would have walked in as a victim. You would have stayed a victim. Tonight you are walking next to me as a woman who pays her own debts. I looked at her. I didn't open the door because I loved you too much to let you remain weak. She nodded slowly. She understood. We reached the bus stop. The bus was approaching, its air brakes hissing. Jasmine turned to me. She hesitated. Dad, she said, I applied to night school for civil engineering. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in a year. I know, I said. She looked shocked. How I know everything, I said. I am a structural engineer. I inspect the foundations. The bus doors opened. Go, I said. Don't be late for work. She stepped onto the bus. She put her coins in the machine. She turned back to look at me one last time. She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling. Good night, Dad. Good night, Engineer Turner, I said. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. I stood on the corner and watched her go. I didn't offer to pay her rent. I didn't offer to buy her a car. I gave her something much more valuable. I gave her my respect. And as I walked back to my truck, I realized that Clara was right. The ring was gone. The money was gone. But the family. The family was finally being built, and this time it was built on rock, not sand. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. It took 6 months for the court to dismantle the intricate web of lies Bradley Smith had spun. I attended every single hearing. I sat in the back row wearing my best suit, watching the prosecutors peel back the layers of his life like rotten drywall. They found everything: the embezzlement, the forged signatures, the Ponzi schemes he ran on his own friends. Brad thought he was a financial wizard. In reality, he was just a thief with a calculator. On the day of the sentencing, Brad didn't look like a wolf anymore. He looked like a sheep, realizing it was shearing time. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Brad stood up. He looked back at the gallery. He wasn't looking for me. He was looking for Jasmine. But Jasmine wasn't there. She was working. She had a shift. And for the first time in her life, she prioritized her responsibility over his drama. The judge brought the gavel down. It made a sound like a gunshot in a canyon. 10 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for at least 8. Restitution to be paid in full to all victims. Brad slumped into his chair. He put his head in his hands. The bailiffs moved in. They shackled his wrists. They shackled his ankles. As they shuffled him out the side door, he looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore. Just the empty, hollow look of a man who realized he had traded a diamond life for a cubic zirconia existence. I watched him disappear behind the steel door. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just checked my watch. I had somewhere to be. I drove my truck to the quiet side of town. I parked in front of a small storefront with a green awning. The sign above the door was hand-painted, The Little Garden. I walked in. The bell chimed. The air smelled of damp earth, cut stems, and lilies. It was a good smell. It smelled like life. Jasmine was behind the counter. She was wearing an apron covered in soil stains. She was arranging a bouquet of sunflowers. Her hands moved with a dexterity I hadn't seen before. She was stripping the thorns off roses, her fingers taped up where she had been pricked. She looked up. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Hi, Dad," she said. She didn't stop working. "I have to finish this order for a wedding. Pickup is in 10 minutes. "Take your time," I said. I leaned against the counter and watched her. She was focused. She was efficient. She wasn't the manager because of her last name. She was the manager because she showed up early and stayed late. She lived in a small apartment 2 blocks away. She took the bus, she paid her own bills, and every month, like clockwork, she sent me a check for $50. I have a wall full of them now. The customer arrived. A nervous young man picking up flowers for his bride. Jasmine smiled at him. It wasn't the fake plastic smile of a socialite. It was a warm, genuine smile. "She is going to love them," Jasmine told him. "Sunflowers mean loyalty. That is a good place to start." The man paid and left. Jasmine wiped her hands on her apron. "How did it go?" she asked quietly. 10 years, I said. She nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. She just absorbed the information like a professional assessing a bill of materials. "He wrote to me again," she said, "asking for money for the commissary." And I asked. "I sent him a book," she said. "The Bible." I told him it was free to read. I laughed. A deep belly laugh that shook my chest. "You are cruel," I said. "I am practical." She smiled. "Come on, my shift is over. Let's go get coffee." My treat. We walked out of the shop. We walked down the street to the diner. We sat in a booth. We ordered black coffee and cherry pie. When the check came, Jasmine snatched it before I could reach for my wallet. "I got this, Dad," she said. I watched her count out the cash. I saw the pride in her eyes. We didn't talk about millions of dollars. We didn't talk about the trust fund. We talked about her night classes. She was getting an A in structural analysis. We talked about the foundation. We talked about the future. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't sitting across from a dependent. I was sitting across from an equal. The sun was setting when I finally drove to the cemetery. The iron gates were open. I drove up the winding path to the hill where the oak tree stood. I got out of the truck. The grass was green and thick. I walked over to the granite headstone. Clara Turner, beloved wife, mother, builder. I knelt down. I brushed a few leaves off the stone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. I opened it. The ring sat there catching the last rays of the sun. It was as beautiful as the day I bought it in 1980. But it felt different now. It didn't feel heavy anymore. I took the ring out. I didn't put it back in the box. I took a silver chain from my pocket. I threaded the chain through the ring. I clasped it around my neck. The diamond rested against my chest right over my heart, cold metal against warm skin. A permanent reminder. "We did it, Clara," I whispered. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree. It sounded like a sigh of relief. "We finished the project," I said to the stone. "It was the hardest job of my life. I had to tear down the walls to save the house. I had to let the roof leak to teach her how to patch it. But she learned, Clara. She learned." I touched the ring under my shirt. "She isn't soft anymore," I said. "She is strong. She is working with her hands. She is paying her debts. She is a Turner." I stood up. My knees popped. I was getting older. The solitude of the last year had aged me, but it had also clarified me. I looked out over the city. I could see the skyline in the distance. I could see the buildings I had helped design. Steel and glass, concrete and stone. They were impressive. They would stand for 100 years. But then I thought about Jasmine in her flower shop, stripping thorns off roses, paying for her father's coffee with crumpled bills. That was the real structure. That was the real legacy. Buildings eventually crumble. Concrete eventually cracks. But character. Character lasts forever. I patted the headstone one last time. "Rest easy, my love," I said. "The foundation is solid. The house will stand." I turned and walked back to my truck. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I started the engine. I had a foundation meeting in the morning. I had 12 students waiting for me. And after that, I had a date with my daughter to help her balance the books at the flower shop. I drove out of the cemetery gates. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I carried her with me around my neck and in my blood. The construction was complete. Legacy versus currency. In a world obsessed with price tags, we often forget the value of what we hold. My daughter saw a $2 million diamond. I saw 40 years of sacrifice and love. She sold her history to buy a fleeting future, only to realize that money without values is just paper that burns. True inheritance isn't what you leave in your children's bank accounts, but what you leave in their character. Sometimes you have to let them go bankrupt financially to save them from being bankrupt morally. The ring is back on my finger, but the real gem is the lesson learned. You can't buy dignity. You have to build it brick by brick. If you have ever had to make a hard choice to save someone you love, hit the like button. If you believe that character is worth more than cash, subscribe to the channel. And share this story with your family. Maybe it will start a conversation that saves a legacy. Thank you for listening.